news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Friday, April 30th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now with rain, 10 degrees in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls. And here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Residents 55 years of age and older across Ottawa and the Eastern Ontario Health Unit are now able to book their COVID-19 vaccination appointment. One caller to our newsroom says this was very easy this morning. They clicked on the 60-plus tab because there is not one for 55, entered their birth date, and now has an appointment for tomorrow. City News reporter Alex Gouge with more details.
The appointments can be made through the provincial booking system and can be scheduled online or over the phone. Slots will be scheduled for both doses, but 16 weeks apart. Residents can book their spots themselves or with the help of somebody else, but folks are asked to only inquire if they are already eligible. This comes after the Eastern Ontario Health Unit hit the milestone yesterday of administering a total of 60,000 doses. In Ottawa, upwards of 320,000 residents have gotten at least one shot of vaccine. The Leeds, Grenville, and Lanark District Health Unit is continuing its rollout campaign. The health unit is also set to keep up with planning future pop-up vaccination sites within other communities. To date, over 39,000 residents across the region has received at least one shot of the vaccine. Alex Gouge, City News.
Now, Health Canada is anticipating a total of 36.5 million vaccine doses from Pfizer, Moderna, and AstraZeneca by the end of June. So the person in charge of handling logistics for the vaccine distribution says it means there is going to be enough delivered to give the first dose before Canada Day to every single adult who wants one. A number of provinces are stepping up their vaccination efforts now with that increase in supply. The Montfort Hospital will cover the cost of returning a body to Scarborough. The family of a man who was transferred here when the local hospital became overwhelmed with COVID patients received a bill to transport his body back. Ottawa South MPP John Fraser brought up this issue in Queen's Park yesterday. Health Minister Christine Elliott says she will make sure this never happens again. A Montfort spokesperson tells City News this morning the family has been told, just send them the bill and the hospital will reimburse. City News time, 9:02. Now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Periods of light rain will switch over to snow tonight as the temperature drops. We've already reached our guaranteed high. It was 11 degrees early this morning. We'll drop to 3 this afternoon and then down to -2 tonight. For today, already reached our guaranteed high, 11.
And right now, raining, and in Smiths Falls and in Ottawa, it's 10 degrees. A final report on Ontario's response to COVID-19 outbreaks in long-term care homes will be submitted to the government today. Ontario's Long-Term Care COVID-19 Commission examined what went wrong in the early days of the pandemic. The report will include recommendations on how the province can protect long-term care homes from any future pandemic. Millions of Indians around the world watching in horror and despair as their home country registers its fourth highest death toll from the COVID-19 pandemic. India's novel coronavirus cases have climbed again today, prompting the army now to open its hospitals. It's a desperate bid to control this massive humanitarian crisis created by an acute shortage of beds, medicine, even oxygen. This person lives on this side of the Atlantic and, like so many others, is worried about his family in India.
If they get sick and if beds are not available, if the oxygen is not available, what can you do right now? So that's always on the back of your mind right now.
India has set a daily global record for more than a week, an average nearly 350,000 infections every single day. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Separating headlines
from hearsay.
It's the Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Friday. We made it. Welcome to the Rob Snow Show on City News. All the great Friday fare on the way. The legendary Lowell Green standing by with his hot take on the big news stories of the day. Bourque is back from Bourque Newswatch on a week's worth of headlines. We'll do the Queen's Park Weekend Review with our panel of MPPs. And Doug Ford's even going to crash the show today. The Premier of Ontario is doing a news conference this morning at 11 o'clock. We'll bring it to you when it begins. It's not been the best of weeks in Ford Nation. He pulled the trigger on paid sick days, and the reaction, well, to say the least, it's been less than enthusiastic. Doug Ford, news conference from the Etobicoke compound, 11 o'clock on City News. Also joining us this morning right after the 9:30 news is the person in charge of the COVID-19 vaccination program for the city of Ottawa, Anthony Monte. They're getting ready, they say, to kick it into high gear with more vaccine doses on the way. And as of this morning, as you heard in our newscast, people 55 years of age and older can book an appointment for a shot at one of the city-run clinics. Many questions for Mr. DeMonte, and we're happy he could make some time for us. It is the Friday free-for-all during our talk-back hour. That's your hour, our call-in hour. We do it every morning between 10 and 11 o'clock, and on Fridays, within reason, it's pretty much wide open. Pretty much anything goes. If there's something in the news, hey, it doesn't even have to be in the news. You want to talk about it, you want to debate it, you want to argue about it, you want to rant about it, let me have it, let some politician have it, have at it. 750-1310 is our call-in line, 750-1310, 613-750-1310. You know, I might do a bit of ranting myself this morning because this week, I haven't really had a chance to express myself on the Trudeau government's plan to basically seize control of the internet. The bid to make the Canadian internet experience a lot like the Chinese internet experience. It is not hyperbole to say Mr. Trudeau's government wants to control your internet. What you can say, what you can post. It wants to control the platforms that you use to access the internet. And it wants to control what you can and can't say on those platforms. It is actually hard to even wrap your head around this power grab. That something like this could even be attempted in a country like Canada that says it cherishes its Charter of Rights and Freedoms. What the Father gave, it seems the Son aims to take away. The fundamental rights in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, this Liberal government that we have in Ottawa is under the impression that these are somehow negotiable. These are not negotiable. Take, for example, Section 2B of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Quote, everyone has the following fundamental freedoms. Freedom of thought, belief, opinion, expression, including freedom of the press and other media of communication. End quote. Everyone. Everyone. Think what you want. It's Canada. You can do that. Believe what you want to believe. It's a free country. Express yourselves. Shout them out loud, your opinions. March down the street with a bullhorn if you want. The Charter protects you. The Charter protects the press and all other media of communication, like the internet. See, the Charter, Mr. Trudeau, Mr. Gilles, they don't seem to understand this, which is astonishing in and of itself. The Charter doesn't say you have freedom of thought unless you disagree with the government. The Charter doesn't say you have freedom of opinion, but only if it is in keeping with the orthodoxy of the day. What kind of freedom is that? That's not freedom at all. The Charter doesn't say there is freedom of the press as long as the press only reports stories that are kind to the government's agenda. That's not press freedom. That's propaganda. Yet this very basic idea that free expression is instrumental to democratic governance is lost on our federal government. And if you don't speak up about the danger posed by Bill C-10, you will lose your internet freedom. The Heritage Minister I assume with the blessing of the Prime Minister, is attempting right now to lay the legislative framework to suppress freedom of expression once and for all. And the content on internet platforms would be regulated, and the platforms would have to make sure their content creators pass a government smell test. That whatever content is created is in line with the government's quote-unquote vision for Canada. And if not, what could happen? Well, this is the plan. The government isn't even shy about it. Fines of $15 million. $15 million and blackouts and internet kill switches. You have violated C10. Your content is not in keeping with the Government of Canada's vision. You have 24 hours to remove from the internet forever that content, or the government will block access to your website. This is being considered in Canada despite the non-negotiable protections that we all have as Canadians under the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. To my liberal friends, the Liberals, I hate to break it to you, will not be in power forever. Would you want a conservative government to have this kind of power? To dictate what you can and can't say online? I'm a right-winger. I wouldn't want a conservative government to have that kind of power. I have a few more things to say about that, but I'll save it for later. There are just many, many things happening in the country that are unsettling. One of the big ones remains the investigation into allegations of sexual misconduct at the highest levels of the Canadian Armed Forces, and the lack of action, the failure to act at all at the highest levels of political power in this country. The cabinet, the Prime Minister's office. And this is what women in the Canadian Armed Forces are now being asked to believe. As powerful men look to shield themselves with this latest charade of an investigation. The defense minister was told by the ombudsman the minister didn't even want to hear anything about it. I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to hear about Jonathan Vance. The defense minister's chief of staff knew about it, told a senior advisor in the PMO. The PCO knew something wasn't right. And the senior advisor in the PMO told his boss, the Prime Minister's chief of staff. And yet women in the Canadian Forces are supposed to buy this spin that the Prime Minister didn't know what it was all about? Everyone else did. Do you really believe this? That the Prime Minister, once again, was the last to know? This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
I wanted to give gifts to my volunteers, so I started making, I knew this is a skill I had, so I made a chocolate that had culture, a cultural based with a teaching, because culture here is not just the little part, it's the large part, it's the fundamental part of our organization. So then we started doing, just little programs, and we sell a few at a fair. And then we started getting contracts. People were starting to enjoy the chocolates, and started getting more and more contracts all across Canada. Then we decided to become a social enterprise, and we were able to create 2 jobs. And Val is one of our chocolatiers, very talented. We were able to help her with employment.
We started just with a little bit in the kitchen, doing a little bit of chocolate together, and next thing, it's just kind of taken off. And it's great, because I love to be creative, and we get to create a lot and make up stuff, and it's just I just love it. It's just great that we get to make money back for Wabano, and It's helping me out, and we're helping just everybody out, Wabano and everything.
We met a very socially conscious business owner being around town, and we decided to partner because beans and chocolate, coffee and chocolate are sort of created the same way. And there's, and they're very, one origin bean, so it was a good pairing together, and it's been a fantastic partnership for both of us.
I was fortunate enough to get introduced to Pierre, the head of Wabano Fine Chocolates, through a local networking group. And I was completely intrigued by the social enterprise that she was running, and then I looked at what we were doing, trying to support local business and supporting local communities, and it was a perfect match, and it's been fantastic ever since.
We make every batch by hand. We temper it by hand to get to the consistency it needs to be to make a good chocolate. And one of the best, also wonderful things we did, we've connected with Ed, with being around town, and our coffee bars have been an amazing hit. So we're really excited about the connection with our coffee.
Firm.
Fair.
Fun.
The Rob Snow Show returns
On Rogers TV and City News. 1011 FM.
and 1310 AM.
Good morning, Lowell Green.
Good morning, Rob. Hard to know where to start this morning. But one thing, we won't have to worry, I don't think, anymore about sexual allegations in the military because, as you know, that judge has been appointed now, and so it's now been, this whole thing has been punted down until after the next election. Trudeau knew absolutely nothing. There was about 700 complaints, apparently, from female members of the military in the past 5 years. That would be the 5 years in which Trudeau was the prime minister. But, the chief of staff knew about it. Everybody in Trudeau's office knew all about it, knew that these were sexual allegations. But, hey, I know nothing. I'm the prime minister. Holy suffer and doodle cats. How anybody can believe anything this guy says is beyond me. But as I say, we won't have to hear very much about it anymore because from now on, every time that the opposition or anybody tries to raise the issue, sexual allegations, when did you know what was going on, Mr. Trudeau? When did the defense minister know? This will all be, as I say, punted down until after the next election because every time a question is asked to say, we can't comment on this. There's an investigation underway now, and we can't comment. So that's what's going to happen. So you can kiss that issue goodbye. But the issue of C10. Oh boy, I agree with you, Rob. I cannot believe that in a free and open democracy like Canada, that anybody would even be contemplating this kind of thing. And not only that, but apparently there is considerable support in the countryside for this kind of a bill. Listen, let me just give you a couple of quotes here. I'm sure you're aware of it. Michael Gilles, G-E-I-S-E,
Michael
law professor at the University of Ottawa.
Yeah.
He is Canada's research chair in Internet and e-commerce law. In other words, he is one of Canada's top experts on the Internet and Internet law. He says, quote, "This gives a remarkable and dangerous step in an already bad piece of legislation." He goes on to say the government believes that it should regulate all user-generated content for the videos for millions of Canadians on sites like YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, hundreds of other services. These services, of course, would include Facebook, etc. It's astonishing. And then we have quotes from the former chair of the,
Mr. Menzies. Yeah.
Peter,
yeah, he was on my show this week.
I got so much information.
Yeah.
Former CRTC Commissioner Peter Menzies says, quote, listen to this. Anybody who doesn't think this is serious, this is the former chair of the CRTC Commission, okay? Bill C-10 does not just infringe on free expression. It constitutes a full-blown assault upon it, and through it, the foundation of democracy.
Yeah, I interviewed him this week. Let me play you a clip. Roll tape, please. Go ahead.
It gives the government, through a government agency, the ability to tell people what they may and may not say. And basically, going forward, everybody who's speaking online, I mean, you'll be okay. You can probably still write a letter and stuff, but everybody who's speaking online would be doing so with permission of the state. And I don't think there's any justification for that.
Yeah.
Now, let me just back up a little bit here so people have a better understanding. According to Menzies, quote, the bill in its current state would turn the YouTube video of a kid's soccer game or the Instagram reel you posted of your brunch into a program that could be subject to regulation under the Canadian Radio, Television, Telecommunication Commission, CRTC rules. Quote, it's your Facebook post, it's your treat, it's your cat videos, it's your pictures of your children and grandchildren and that sort of stuff. What it means is that somebody will be watching from the government or a government regulator and will be able to order it to be taken down if they find that it does not suit whatever purposes they have. This is a bill that has full support of the Liberal Party in Parliament and apparently the full support of the NDP, which means unless something drastically changes, this bill is going to be passed. Now, this is especially galling for a guy like me. I'm sure you're aware that I do an online radio program from 2 to 2:30 every day. And I have thank God it's the internet online, and so I can say things there that I could never say, for example, on your program now. I called the Prime Minister some pretty nasty names yesterday because I was free to do so, and that's a freedom of expression. I could not do that if the CRTC is patrolling. They would kick me off, and as you say, there's a very heavy fine. But it's not just guys like me who want the right to comment. It's anybody that, for example, if you post something that's critical of the government, if the government is regulating this, are they going to allow that? But not only that, it throws cold water because just the fact that you know that this is going to be monitored and that you could be fined. This is, as I say, is going to put a damper on free expression.
Yes, it puts a chill on free expression.
Precisely.
Right. Yes.
It's, because
people will even if they're not censoring, people will self-censor.
Absolutely. I would have to.
Yes.
I mean, I would, much of what I say, I would be afraid to say on the internet if I knew that the CRTs, just as when I was broadcasting at CFRA, and you were the same today, I mean, you are under the control of a federal regulator. There are things that you are afraid to say, you would love to say. I know this. And it was the same with the things you would love to say, things that you feel are true, that you have researched, but you are afraid to say it because you know that there's going to be people listening and monitoring, and you can get yourself into deep doo-doo. I mean, in over 60 years, I got myself into deep doo-doo more than once. But thank God I never went to jail. But let me give you an example.
No, but you did have to issue apologies, and they had to run several times a day and everything else, right?
Just as an example, this is a number of years ago. I got into a debate with the Church of Scientology. I called them a bunch of frauds. I spent days and days. Ernie Kelk and I had to go down to Toronto. I was charged, and they kept throwing this out, and then the Church of Scientology would bring up another charge. This is the kind of chill, as you call it, that hangs over the heads of anybody that's doing broadcast today. But, Rex, if you get a chance, I don't know.
Yeah, Rex Murphy's very good in the Post.
Rex Murphy, I'm just going to say that if you get a chance to read him. Murphy says this kind of action on behalf of government is inevitable. He says it started in our universities, where, you can recall, a number of years ago, various conservative speakers were not allowed to speak. There were protests shut down. The university was shut down. Conservative speakers not allowed to be there, et cetera, et cetera. Obviously, not free speech. And Murphy talks about in some universities there are areas set aside, so-called free speech areas, which means that only in this particular area do you have free speech. Elsewhere on campus, you can't have free speech. But you're right. That's not free speech. But this, I guess it's inevitable because in many ways, the federal government has control over virtually everything that's written, printed, etc. today, except on the internet. The internet is the only place where you're really free to say whatever you want. All right? I mean, they've given $600 million to the newspapers. I don't care what you say. This places the newspapers, I think, in a special position. I mean, we know the bias in the CBC. I don't even have to discuss that. CTV, well, you've had your experience there. I mean, the CTV of the Bell Media relies upon the goodwill of government for virtually everything it does. I think this Bell Media is applying for a new rate increase right now. They have to have federal government approval, don't they? So they're not going to allow anything that's really critical of the federal government. So the last area where Lowell Green, or anybody could say whatever you want about whatever, about whomever, they want to come in and control that. And let me tell you, this guy, Stephen Gilles, he's the heritage minister. This guy scares the bejabbers out of me. I think that he may be the brightest of all the members of the cabinet. I mean, let's face it, that's a pretty dull cabinet, including the prime minister, by the way, pretty dull, all of them. I think that Gilles is probably the brightest. And don't forget, he is a radical. He is by far the most ideological. Don't forget, he's the former director of Greenpeace. He has been arrested for, trying to climb the CN Tower or something in protest. He is leading the liberal attack on pipelines. I think he is a growing influence in the cabinet there and a growing influence over the prime minister. This guy, I think, is dangerous. This is coming from him. This is his idea. He wants to control. And Bill C-10 does exactly that. And I just, for your listeners, I just want to point out, you may think, oh, well, hey, if you use Facebook or your kids use Instagram, government, if this bill passes, somebody from the government is going to be viewing that, and they are going to decide what will be allowed.
Is it in keeping with our vision for Canada?
In keeping with our vision for Canada.
And and this is my caution to my progressive friends. Would you want a conservative government to have that kind of power? You wouldn't. You wouldn't. You would be outraged. They would have to get the helicopters back in the air saying Harper hates me if this was going on.
That's why the Liberals today seem to be, a lot of Liberals saying, oh, well, the Liberals are in power, et cetera, et cetera. But you're right. Someday the Conservatives are going to be back in power. Hell's bells, the NDP may even be in power. How'd you like to have Jagmeet Singh deciding what you can say on Instagram? I mean, that's the specter that is in front of us here, folks. And you know what? And what I don't understand is almost universally, and in fact, even some of the liberal leading columnists are aghast at this. And so I can't believe that they are still trying to push this through. And that Jagmeet Singh and his NDP. Here is the left wing again, right? The left wing wants to control what the rest of us say. They feel that they are omnipotent, that they can make no mistakes, that only they are the arbiters of what we should be able to see, hear, read, etc., and they will decide for us what we can read, see, post, and say. Okay. Beautiful.
Well, you're still welcome here. Thank you.
But you know what? I'm worried because
I know.
Through,
look, we got to go.
If this goes through, I'm finished on the internet. That's what's happening here, folks. Okay. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you. Lowell Green, Hall of Fame broadcaster, and his latest book still available, Common Sense for a Wounded Nation. Coming up right after the news, Anthony DeMonte, City of Ottawa General Manager of Emergency and Protective Services. We'll talk the vaccine program. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
Number one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Friday, April 30th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and Smiths Falls, rain and 10 degrees. Here's what's making news this hour. Anyone 55 years of age or older in the Eastern Ontario or Ottawa Health Units area can now register for their COVID vaccine. Increased supply, the province lowering the age category to 55 and up. And Canada is slowly recovering from COVID economically as well. StatsCan estimates the economy grew at an annualized rate of 6.5% in the first quarter of this year. Again in February, overall economic activity about 2% below levels seen pre-pandemic, so February of last year. Taking into account the preliminary number for March, StatsCan estimates the economy last month was roughly 1% below pre-pandemic levels. Canadian Union of Public Employees says it plans to challenge this back-to-work legislation headed to the Senate today. The union, representing more than 1,100 dock workers in Montreal, say this bill is unconstitutional. It says the dispute was sparked when the Maritime Employers Association began imposing extended workday hours without consulting workers. The House of Commons did approve the bill very early yesterday morning around 2 o'clock, but it must still be passed by the Senate. That is before that chamber today. City News Time, 9:33. I'm Andrew Boyle. For News Anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's a pillar of community opinion.
The Rob Snow Show returns
On Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
And as we've been reporting all morning, and Andrew just mentioned, 55 years of age and older, now eligible to be vaccinated. Try and book an appointment now. And the person in charge of Ottawa's vaccination program says everyone on the front lines is getting ready to ramp things up. Anthony DeMonte is the city's general manager of Emergency and Protective Services, and he joins me this morning on City News. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob.
Yeah, it's great to hear from you again. I thank you so much for taking the time for our listeners. What is about to change with the vaccination program in Ottawa?
So a couple of things. The provincial governments, as you just mentioned, the announcements have become much more aggressive. It looks like we're going to start seeing significantly more vaccine supply arriving, which is great news. And over the next few weeks, we'll be lowering the age band of eligibility quite quickly to get to by May 24th. Anyone age 18 and above can get a vaccine. So that's it's a very aggressive timeline, but we've been looking forward for this day that we be in this position and we're going to have enough vaccine and really ramp things up.
Right. You sound excited.
I am actually. Rob, this is, I think, the only way we're going to get out of the situation we're in and seeing the the terrible deaths around the world, and the virus mutating and having other challenges out there, is we get everybody vaccinated. So at least if we have enough vaccine, we've had the capacity and we've been ramped up and ready at the city for some time, and we've only been able to use 4 of our 7 mass vaccination clinics. So we can ramp those up to get up to our 7, and we can run them 24 hours if we had to. We've got our 2 hospital clinics partners that are working well, and we're in high-risk neighborhoods as well. So if we have enough vaccine, we can turn this machine on and get everybody at least their first dose, and then we're already starting to plan for the second dose, and then maybe get back to some semblance of normalcy in our lives.
Yeah. How confident are you, Mr. de Monte, that whatever constraints have existed in the vaccine supply have been resolved now?
Yeah, those are good questions. I mean, I've often told some of your other colleagues in the media, like, I'm on the retail end of the business. I put needles in arms, and our team have got the infrastructure in place. We've got the vaccination teams there, but we can't do anything without vaccine. And you're right. We saw for a while the supply chain up and down, and then starting to stabilize. And then last week, as a matter of fact, we again, another Pfizer only half the product, and Moderna there was a delay. So I'm looking at this positively and optimistically, and I want to be ready, and we are ready to go. And I hope this is the beginning of all those problems behind us, and we're going to start seeing flow of vaccine and the supply chain being stable and not having any more issues. But I can't guarantee that. But what we're seeing from senior levels of government, both the provincial and federal government, they say that time has arrived, and they're now planning for that, and they're telling us, be ready. So we're going to be ready.
I'm curious, since all of this started, and the first doses started going in the first arms back in the middle of December here in the city of Ottawa in healthcare settings, what have you and your team perhaps learned or have had to adjust throughout the course of this effort so far?
Yeah, I think we've taken two things here that we've looked at and that we've done. When we look at colleagues elsewhere in the province, we really took an approach here of I use the term Team Ottawa, but it sounds really nice. But the hospitals were key partners in this since the beginning. Dr. Etches and the public health team and the city. We said, listen, we all bring different teams to the different tools and expertise to the table. If we work together, we can do a really good job. And that's what we did since the beginning. So, and I'll give an example of that. Dr. Etches has the responsibility. She's our medical officer of health. She decides and drives the strategic approach to this and how, from a public health perspective, we can achieve vaccination of the right groups and save lives and reduce hospitalizations. The hospital teams, particularly at the beginning, the products could only go to the hospitals. It couldn't even be distributed elsewhere. That changed later on. They stepped up right away, and the Ottawa Hospital, Queensway, Montfort, the CEOs of all those hospitals worked with us and continue to work with us. And then the city has the infrastructure, the buildings, the capacity to move things around. And quite candidly, several thousand staff have been reassigned to support, whether it's for parking, for greeters, to prepare the buildings, the IT component of all this. So we've worked together and made a seamless system. And I'll say it because I'm proud of it. All I get are emails from people when they do the experience and they go through one of these clinics. It's a great customer experience, and that's what we wanted.
Mr. de Monte, just jump in there. I've heard that repeatedly. Callers to my program saying they've gone to the Sportsplex or they've gone to City Hall and really amazed at the job. No problems at all. And I wanted to ask you about that. That was actually one of the questions I have written down. I was hoping you could outline the infrastructure needs here in the city that you had to coordinate to pull off this sort of effort. And I mean outside of the facilities, City Hall, the Nepean Sportsplex, what have you. But the freezers, the trucks, the medical supplies, you mentioned IT. I didn't even think about that. What the staff that has had to be diverted from, say, other city operations to help with this effort. Give us a sense of the logistics there.
Yeah, it is when you look at it. It didn't happen seamlessly, but it happened because of the team effort. And we stood up. We call our emergency operations center our command center at the city, like we do whenever there's a disaster. So we really did this as if this was a disaster, and it is. It's one that's very different than our major bus crashes that we've had, or tornadoes, or major floods, where we put those models in place. But we did it for this, and you gave some perfect examples: the infrastructure, the IT requirements to be able to work with the province's systems, the freezers that we had to have, the PPE, protective equipment for all the staff that were working and continue to work in the community doing our regular city work, but as well for these community clinics to make sure our staff were safe and we were protecting the public that were going to come as well too. Ordering needles and having the freezers and the vaccine and moving that vaccine under very specific guidelines that are set out for the movement of the vaccine. All the clinicians, other than the public health team, which normally does the early vaccination that we all get our flu shots, but that's a very small team and it's a very different operation. We had to bring in and hire hundreds of nurses. Our paramedics stepped in as well too with our mobile clinics to do our rural community, because that was something we didn't want to leave the rural communities behind. So we had to prepare and organize for that. So it goes on and on, to be honest with you, and it's been really a successful operation. And now we're at this precipice or pinnacle of, wow, it's finally arriving. We're going to get as much vaccine as we want. We can open up our 7 clinics. We can run them 24 hours if we want. We've got drive-through plans as well too, if that's something that we think will be valuable. And we also have a very tactical approach for the 21 high-risk communities, Rob, that have been disproportionately impacted. We're treating those communities with very, very specific programs, and we're doing all sorts of outreach, and that's really our public health team that are really good at that work, and they're being supported by physicians that are stepping up as well too in the community, and it's really been a team effort. So I look forward to having a chat with you hopefully at the end of the year, and we've all got 2 doses, and our public health experts will be telling us we can start getting back to some semblance of normalcy and start seeing our families and, go sit in the pub and have a beer.
Right. Yes. What is the time frame for vaccinating essential workers in Ottawa, and who qualifies as an essential worker?
Yeah. So all the designations of essential workers are provincially done by the scientific team there. There's 2 phases, phase 1 and phase 2. In phase 1, we've had all the high priority healthcare workers, the paramedics, police officers, firefighters. When we get into phase 2, the other high priorities, there's 2 different groups there, and there's a long list from bus drivers to grocery workers to a whole bunch of others. I guess what's happening now is while they are the priority and we're opening it, and as a matter of fact, licensed child care workers, which were, as of April 29th, yesterday, were able now to call in, and they were the first group of group number 2 that can call in. I see this as kind of pivoting, because as we look at this aggressive time frame, it really becomes less of an issue for those high-risk groups, because we're going to be dropping age bands so quickly that everybody's going to be captured. So I think there's 2 things happening right now, and I don't think that was planned, to be candid with you. I think the province was going to continue working through these high-risk groups, and they started with the child care workers, and then probably we're going to do the education workers and keep moving on based on their priorities. But now when we look at this aggressive timeline, as I said, by the week of May 10th, anybody 40 and over by the week of May 17th, 30 and over. So, and May 24th, 18 and over, I think that'll overtake, and everybody, including those important high-risk workers, will be able to get their vaccination regardless. So I think what's happening is both systems are going to be overlapping each other.
What can residents do to make sure the process goes as smoothly as possible?
Yeah. So when is your time? Call in, go online, go get your appointment, and just get one appointment. The thing that's not under our control at the city is the pharmacy model, and I believe that's a really good model, the pharmacy model. I think the challenge they've had, they get their vaccine directly from the province, and the challenge they've had, they've done this not piecemeal, but you have to call each individual pharmacy to get an appointment, et cetera. And what happens is, you call one, they don't have any, you call another, and people are so much want to get their vaccine that they're calling multiple pharmacies and booking multiple appointments. And all that does is clog up the system, and then there's a whole bunch of no-shows. So, if you get an appointment in a pharmacy, just take one appointment and show up on that day. On the mass vaccination clinics, what you're seeing is the age bands are now dropping quite significantly. So when it's your turn, go in, just get one appointment. Well, on that system, you can only get one appointment. Or if you're going to see your physician and you have an appointment with your physician, then don't go book one in a pharmacy. Don't go book one on the provincial system. And I think in hindsight, you asked me earlier, what are lessons learned? I think that was a bit of when we look at it, and it was for good reasons. We were trying to accelerate things at a provincial level, wasn't a local level, but all these different avenues, we should have just had one number, one IT solution. Everybody goes there, and then you're told, okay, Rob, you go to the pharmacy, and in my case, I'll go see my doctor, and that would have been dispatched that way, but hindsight's always perfect. Hopefully never have a pandemic again, but I think that's a lesson learned.
Okay. So my producer, David, over there is 23 years old, young, healthy guy. His only complaint is that he can't go golfing. Are you saying he might actually be able to book an appointment by the May 2-4 long weekend?
Yes, sir.
Wow.
That's the aggressive timeline that we have in front of us, and if this timeline that the province has set forth comes with the vaccine, I can tell you in Ottawa, we'll be able to give him his vaccine before that long weekend. And then, well, I don't know if he'll be able to play golf or not. That depends on the public health official, but I hope so for him.
Might get vaccinated before he plays golf again. Okay, that's great.
Perhaps.
Mr. DeMonte, to you, your team, all the staff at the City of Ottawa that are making this happen on a daily basis, thank you.
Really appreciate it, Rob. We're part of this community and our loved ones as well, like everyone else. We want this done as quickly as possible, but thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thanks for the time. Anthony DeMonte is the General Manager of Emergency and Protective Services for the City of Ottawa. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
We just took over this business about a few weeks prior to the pandemic, but we've been loving the community, the people, very friendly, but it's been very difficult starting up a new business, just the time that we did, but I'm sure it's the same everywhere. We did take a broken business, which doesn't help us, but we thought we believe in what we do. We're very passionate about food, and we just really wanted to share the Iraqi culture through our food. All our recipes are homemade, so this is very unique. Usually you hear restaurants, shops, it's all frozen food or prepared food, so nothing here is prepared, everything is homemade. We get our meat and produce from a local farm, so supporting local is the way to go. We are supporting all the way. And our meat are actually marinated the day of, so it's as fresh as can be. Quality ingredients and everything is made from scratch. I get a lot of people when they come in, they say it tastes like Middle Eastern, like back home. So for you to have been to Iraq and have the food there, you can really compare and see the similarity. We do like to focus on healthy. So our recipes, not only the homemade, Again, everything is from scratch, but we have like from combos and to like small sandwiches. Our one of our favorites and very popular is the chicken salad and the beef salad. So now you're getting all the protein and all these amazing ingredients that we all need. During this time, I find a lot of people are sitting at home and not enough movement. So to come here and get something healthy other than go elsewhere and just put, what's not so good for our bodies, makes a huge difference. So we have shawarma sandwiches, combos. I mean, if you're looking for a meal to feed your family, I would highly recommend the family platter. It comes literally with everything, with potatoes, with rice, with chicken, with beef, and we don't charge extra for mix. I know a lot of places do. Here we just add everything to your platter. And lots of healthy choices for sure. We're very passionate about food, and for our small family business, it's been good. Like I said, it's a little struggle, but we are not a chained restaurant.
He's the opinionated Ottawa icon.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Bourque is back. Pierre Bourque from Bourque Newswatch. Good morning.
Rob, good morning. Can I give you a little anecdote just to kick things off?
Sure.
We live in a big city. We're connected to the world via the internet. News is instantaneous and on and on and on. How modern are we? And yet, here in the nation's capital, I'm living in the west end of the city, and it's a rural area, but it's part of the city. And last night, my wife goes out onto the front porch to let the cat in. So she goes out there, the lights come on, and suddenly she hears this giant shriek just off beyond visibility. It's in the dark. It's about 9:30 last night. And this shriek was like something we've never heard before. We've heard deer snort. We've heard raccoons fight. We've heard all of that kind of stuff. We've heard wolves howl at the moon. We've heard coyotes and all of that. But this sound was absolutely unique, and it was shrill, and it was ear-piercing. And it repeated itself every 10 seconds or so for the better part of 15 minutes as an animal off in the dark was moving from right to left very, very slowly, but clearly telling us that it was there and we shouldn't be bothering it any as it moseyed along. So after it disappeared, we came in, of course, we consulted Professor Google, and it turns out it was a lynx.
Oh, wow. Ooh.
So that was pretty special last night.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay.
Yep.
What do you think about the week Doug Ford had? Doug Ford's going to do a news conference in a little more than an hour. We're going to carry it here on City News. What do you think about his week?
Well, Doug Ford or Doug Ford's government? Doug's been convalescing at home, or at least certainly isolating at, is it his mother's place or something?
Yeah.
We'll have to see how he looks and what he says today. But, there's been a staccato of flip-flops from that guy and his government over the last while. I think right now with the flood of vaccines coming in, with the fact that, eligibility in terms of age ranges is going to be dropping drastically over the next 3 weeks, that's all good fodder for that government, and those are laurels that they shouldn't rest on, but they'll certainly be crowing about them today.
Okay. But nevertheless, what's your take on the situation in Ontario generally when it comes to COVID-19?
Well, look, Nova Scotia is back into its problems. British Columbia has its problems. Manitoba, we heard the premier a few days ago decrying the problems that are going on. I think it's something.
Yeah, Alberta, more than 2,000 cases in Alberta now. Yesterday, right? So,
and let's not forget. Just a year ago, it seems so long ago, frankly, but just a year ago, Quebec was the basket case.
That's right.
They seem to be doing better than most. And certainly Montreal did not see this whack of third wave that we've seen here in Ontario.
Well, in fact, on a per capita basis, you could make the case that Nova Scotia has a higher case count than Quebec now. I mean, there's less than a million people living in Nova Scotia, so you get 100 cases in Nova Scotia. That's a big number. So.
Yeah, well, and all I'm saying is that isn't that something to see that turnaround? And yet India, there was a time. Look, let's transpose ourselves for a moment to India. There was a time not too long ago where they were considered actually a beacon. They had done a good job, and they were getting a handle on it. Then suddenly everything has exploded, as your own newscast has reported the numbers coming out on a daily basis all this past week and the same last week. They're hitting daily rates like the likes of which we've never seen during the pandemic. And because of the vast number of people that live in that country, 1 billion people, maybe more,
right?
And they live in close quarters, right? They have big families. They live in close quarters, and hospitals are having a real tough time. So it's great to see finally that the rest of the world is picking up on that and coming into help.
Okay. Now, Pierre is part of a news podcast called The News Hounds that he does with a couple of our mutual friends, Mike Therrien, former editor-in-chief of the Toronto Sun and the Ottawa Sun, and Rick Gibbons, former publisher of the Toronto Sun, former broadcaster here as well, and a longtime journalist. And one of the topics that you've been pounding away on your podcast is the investigation into sexual misconduct in the Canadian Armed Forces. With that being said, I'd be curious to have your take on the latest turn of events. What do you think is going on there?
Yeah, you've got to wonder if there's a cover-up underway, and what becomes of the Prime Minister and his and his Defense Minister, not the Chief of the Defense Staff, but his Defense Minister, that they seem to have not wanted to know. It's bad enough that they claim they didn't know, but we've heard some recordings with respect to the Minister of National Defense. It didn't seem he wanted to know when he was presented with the facts. And this is very, very disconcerting. The military is the biggest, up until this pandemic, I think the single biggest spender of government dollars. And they're certainly spending, like drunken sailors on new frigates, and they're looking at new fighter jets and God knows what else, at a time when cyber war seems to be the bigger threat, but that's another story. But, the way that we saw what happened with Vice Admiral Mark Norman, and what happened there, and then Jonathan Vance, and then this thing here with to me, it's a can of worms. And the more daylight that's being shed on that, the worse it's looking. The fact that the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff knew and didn't say anything, that's totally hard to believe. And if you're seeking public office, and I'm sure there are listeners, Rob, there are listeners right now out there that at some point aspire to city council, aspire to run for provincial legislature or parliament. If you want to be elected by your fellow residents, your fellow citizens, go and represent. Then don't go there and shut your eyes. Go there to lead, go there to represent, go there to know.
Yeah, sunlight is the best disinfectant. This is what people are being asked to believe, okay? The Defense Minister knew, his Chief of Staff knew. Elder Marquez, Senior Advisor to the Prime Minister, knew. Michael Wernick, former Clerk of the Privy Council, knew. Katie Telford, Chief of Staff to the Prime Minister, knew. All these people knew something wasn't right, but the Prime Minister didn't know anything about it? Is that really believable? I mean, if Doug Ford knew that Rod Phillips was in St. Bart's, which is a news story today, top news story in the Globe and Mail, is it really believable that the Prime Minister didn't know there was something untoward happening with the Chief of the Defense Staff?
Yeah, and if he didn't know, what does that say about his office?
And what does that say about him?
And what does it say about him? Because it is unbelievable in both senses of the word there. It is unbelievable that he would not know. And that, assuming he did know, because it just seems incredible and incredulous that he wouldn't know, but he didn't act.
Yeah.
You got two bad things there. Yeah. Two bad things.
Okay, look. Have a great weekend.
Same to you, my friend.
Be careful out there.
Yeah, we have to. We have to.
Bye-bye. Pierre Bourque of Bourque Newswatch. Talk Back Hour Friday, free for all line for you right now, 750-1310 on the Rob Snow Show on City News.
This is City News.
CIWW 1310 AM in Ottawa.
And CJET 1011 FM in Smiths Falls and the Valley. Number 1 for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 1011 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Friday, April 30th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and Smiths Falls, some rain and 10 degrees. And here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Just getting the latest daily case count of COVID-19 in Ontario. 3,887 more cases, along with 21 more deaths being reported today in Ontario. Now, these results come from 53,074 tests done, and the positivity rate is right now at 7.4%. Now, of these new cases, again, almost 4,000, Ottawa has 196. There are 27 new cases in Eastern Ontario's health unit, 5 more in Renfrew, and 4 new cases in Leeds, Grenville, and Lanark. City News time at 10:02. As COVID-19 vaccine rollout ramps up, residents who are 55 and older now able to book their provincial appointment. The person in charge of the city rollout says we've reached the pinnacle of the rollout. At this moment, the city is using just 4 of 7 mass vaccination clinics, but plans are in place to start using more.
We can run them 24 hours if we had to. We've got our 2 hospital clinics partners that are working well, and we're in high-risk neighborhoods as well. So if we have enough vaccine, we can turn this machine on and get everybody at least their first dose, and then we're already starting to plan for the second dose.
That is Anthony Monte, the GM of Emergency Services with the city. He tells City News Ottawa vaccinating residents is the best way out of this pandemic and achieving a sense of normalcy. A push from the provinces to strengthen Canada's land border with the U.S. and a new source for some of Canada's COVID vaccines. They will likely be the focus as the Prime Minister holds a media briefing today. Here's City News Parliament Hill reporter Cormac McSweeney.
In a letter obtained by us from the Ontario government to the federal government, the province is pushing the feds to impose a mandatory 3-day quarantine in hotels for all travelers entering Canada at land crossings. That rule is currently in place for air travelers, and the feds have not made the move yet for land crossings, saying it's not feasible, given many of our border crossings are in remote locations. The province says there are reports of international travelers booking return flights into nearby American airports and driving across to avoid the hotel quarantine. Now, this all comes after a call between the Prime Minister and Premiers last night where travel restrictions were discussed, as well as vaccine supplies and provincial paid sick leave. There's also news today on the vaccine front as CBC reports Pfizer will soon start supplying Canada's doses out of plants in the U.S. instead of Belgium, which had occurred due to export controls from the U.S. We're expecting to hear more from the Prime Minister about what this will mean for the speed and size of our deliveries. Cormac McSweeney, Parliament Hill.
City News time, 10:04. StatsCan estimates the economy grew at an annualized rate of 6.5% in the first quarter of this year. It compares to a growth at an annualized rate of almost 10% in the first 3 months of 2020.
Statistics Canada says the economy grew 0.4% in February and estimated growth of 0.9% for March. Taking into account the preliminary numbers for March, StatCan estimates the economy last month was roughly 1% below pre-pandemic levels. Service industries that have been hard hit through the course of the COVID-19 pandemic showed a small gain in February, while goods-producing industries had a small contraction for the first time since last April. Emily Javeski, The Canadian Press.
And if you need a little incentive to give blood, how about pizza? Domino's has teamed up with Canadian Blood Services in a blood drive that will last until Sunday. Anyone donating gets a coupon for a free small pizza. Book your appointment to give blood at blood.ca/Domino's. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Talk back.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
It is the Friday free-for-all talk-back hour, 750-1310, so it's wide open on topics. I see a number of our callers are interested in speaking about C10. I'm glad to hear that because, my gosh, in all my years walking this earth, I'm not sure if I've seen a more frightening attempt at a power grab at government overreach than I've seen with Trudeau's Bill C-10. And it just can't go ahead as is. It just can't. And the idea that the New Democrats would support the Liberals in passing such a bill, or scarier still, that Mr. Trudeau could win a majority government and ram this through, it's beyond. I mean, you have to ask yourself, do you really want the Trudeau government to regulate the internet? Platforms like YouTube? Do you want the Trudeau government to have the authority to take down websites because the government deems the content to be harmful or not in line with the government's vision? Do you want the government to have basically an internet kill switch? I mean, these are the stakes. And my liberal friends, if you don't find any fault in this, ask yourself, would you be okay with granting the same power to a conservative government? Giving Aaron O'Toole that kind of power to control what you can and can't post, what you can and can't share, what you can and can't say on the internet? To order that whatever you post, share, publish on the internet, fall in line? And think about that. Fall in line with a conservative government's vision for the country? See, I don't think you would stand for that. And that's what makes this legislation so very dangerous. And I think every Canadian, no matter the political stripe, whether you're a political person at all, you should recoil in disgust and express your opposition to what this government is trying to do, and think about when they're trying to do it. They are trying to do it while most people are still struggling with the greatest health and economic challenge they've ever faced in their entire lives, and that's shameful. That is shameful. It gets a lot to get me talking about anything but COVID-19 these days, but this issue with Bill C-10, it's that important, and I've been trying to get into it all week, but, you know, there's an old line in politics. Events, my dear boy, events. Events keep getting in the way. But Bill C-10, just one of many things that we can talk about this morning on the Rob Snow Show, Talk Back Hour Friday free-for-all. Des in Carp. Good morning, Des.
Good morning, Rob.
Yes.
Well, it started to be a good morning until I heard Lowell's definition of Bill C-10.
Mm-hmm. Scary, right?
Scary. Well, I'm telling you, scary is not the word. I've been around for a long time, but I've never heard a government before that wants power so bad that they would put something, all those things in Bill C-10. This guy is completely gone. Well, I don't know. I don't think it's him. There's another one behind him. Was on your on the news there or just before, I think, or 9 or something like that, where he is in cabinet or something, some rebel or something.
Oh, Mr. Gilles, yeah.
Oh,
the heritage minister.
Yeah, he's probably parting Justin's hair for him. But anyway. Yeah, that is one. And what another thing I'm afraid of, too, is we'll only have one paper. That's all we're going to have. Because the government, what they'll do, they will fund the other paper and the paper that he wants. I think it'll be paper, not papers.
Right, okay.
Even your show is in jeopardy of something like that.
Well, I don't know. But people need to be aware. I don't even think, people are so wrapped up in the pandemic now that I don't know if people are really aware what's going on with Bill C-10, Des. And I thank you for your time. And I'm so glad that at least you're paying attention. Let's go to Joanne. Take Joanne's call. Good morning, Joanne.
Good morning.
Hi.
Before I go on about YouTube, I just want to pick up where you left off with the Canadian Armed Forces. Matt Gurney has a terrific article in the National Post, and he outlines just the indifference, the cavalier use of power that PMO had and the Prime Minister had, and deliberately ignoring these sexual allegations in the armed forces. And what came to mind is the idea that Louise Arbour, even though she was invited to conduct yet another investigation into the armed forces, there is nothing forcing her to accept. In fact, a public decline would go a long way in building her reputation, though it doesn't need it, but in building her reputation in certain circles, and it would be a slap in the face to this government. So Louise Arbour does not have to acquiesce and be a useful idiot in this whole thing.
Well, that was kind of a thought that I had this morning, Joanne. It's sort of sad that someone as distinguished as Louise Arbour would be part of such a charade. I mean, she's as smart as they come, so she must know that she's a central figure in this grand game of charades that they've set up here.
Yeah, and charade is an excellent word. And she doesn't have to be, and it really goes, in my opinion, makes me question her. You know, everything is politics now, and that's what's so sad. This is what is so stressful.
And we should remember what her role is here. It's not that she's going to do the investigation. She's going to advise the military how to do the investigation.
Well, really what she's going to do is lend her name so that it looks legitimate.
Right.
How stupid do they think we are?
Right.
But clearly, Canadians are docile, and they are a bit stupid. You just kind of wonder why people can't see the forest for the trees, and that leads me to the freedom of speech. And we know that it's lost its primacy, and I don't need to repeat what you and Lowell have pointed out, and many other people in the National Post hammering away at it. But it didn't start there. Freedom of conscience was thrown under the bus when it came to MAID. Physicians were not guaranteed the freedom not to euthanize their patients or offer MAID as a solution to suffering. They were not protected. Now there's another piece of legislation coming in that is hopefully going to guarantee them freedom of conscience. Not every physician wants to participate in this, in medical aid in dying. But the greater good is not, the greater good is in protecting everyone's rights. That used to be known. And we know now that university culture has been irrevocably changed by the lack of freedom of speech. Medical culture will be irrevocably changed by lack of conscience rights. And overall, the whole culture is changed by all of it, whether it's self-censorship or a lack of people entering into certain fields. There'll be no sober second thought, and how that damages a culture. I honestly think that if the Liberals get a majority, they will be the most dangerous government we've ever had. They are modeling themselves after China, and it's inconceivable, but there it is before us.
Okay. Thank you, Joanne. Always great points. Great to hear from you today. Corey in Ottawa. Corey, you're on City News. Hi.
Good morning, Rob.
Hi, Corey.
Let's not forget the sexual harassment that the RCMP female police officers have endured for many, many years. Mm-hmm. So let's not forget these women as well. We're in the middle of...
And how many investigations and how many retired Supreme Court justices have to be hired to do investigations into these issues?
That's correct. That's correct. Okay. I'm just beside myself this morning. We're in the middle of a pandemic, a lockdown, and there's still so many huge problems happening across the country. And we're supposed to be acting normal. How can we act normal in a lockdown? I mean, nobody is conducting themselves in the proper format, if you ask me, in the public or whatever, you know. Everybody's under stress. Everybody is, wondering what's going to happen with our future, what's going to happen tomorrow. If I go outside today, am I going to get sick? If I go to the store to buy groceries, everything is so different.
Yes.
So different.
A lot of people are on edge. A lot of nerves have been frayed, haven't they?
They have.
Yeah.
But yeah, we got to keep the eye on the ball, especially for the big problems as well.
Yeah.
Like you said.
Well, isn't that it? While almost everyone else in the country is all wrapped up fighting COVID-19, for example, you have Bill C-10, massive power grab.
That's right. That's right.
Your government is attempting to seize control of the internet, Corey.
That's right. Well, Rob, I'm on disability, and my worker wanted me to get some information for him. No problem, okay? But he wanted me to do it in a lockdown. How am I supposed to get some information to him in a proper, normal, quote-unquote, normal time frame in the middle of a lockdown?
Good question.
This is impossible.
Okay.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you,
I
Corey.
enjoy your
Thank you.
show.
Well, I appreciate you listening and calling and participating and caring. Corey, great listener there. This is the Rob Snow Show Talkback Hour Friday free-for-all on City News.
It's such a beautiful feel because it's all natural. I'm able to talk to a lot of people who are going through different journeys of health where they really don't know where to start, where to begin. And I'm happy and grateful to have all this knowledge where I can actually help them and guide them. So, of course, medications have a great place in our system, but even so do natural therapies, which have been around for centuries and centuries. Like, old time, ancient times, everything, herbs grew, everything was done with nature, all healing was done with nature. So I'm totally in love with all the elements with nature. In our beautiful village of Manatic, the Manatic Natural Market, you can find tremendous different things. So we have herbs, we have vitamins, we have natural body care, we do infrared sauna therapy, nutrition counseling, acupuncture, Bowen therapy, energy healing. So we're like a wellness hub along with being a full health food store. We are 1 year into pandemic since it started last year in March. It was a shock. Usually I see things coming, and I definitely did not see that coming. Golden Root is a product that I created 4 years ago, actually for my kids, just for immune system, overall health. And it just took off with certain friends of mine who had cancer or some severe issues, and they started finding that it was really helping them from different tests they had done with their doctor. And I knew I had something really special. So then I went through the proper procedure of being able to sell it. So it's actually, I'm not allowed to make it anymore in my house 4 years ago, and it is made in a Health Canada approved lab, and then it comes to me. And what Golden Root is a formulation of turmeric, ginger, lavender, oregano, and black pepper, all food grade, which is the most bioavailable turmeric in the market right now for pain, inflammation, digestion, immune system, concussion, liver health, and brain health. So, and it tastes like salad dressing. We do a lot of in-house, so we make our in-house concoctions of teas. You can come here, tell us what your health issues are, and we can blend it right there. And there's some that are already prepared beforehand for sleeping, for anxiety, for different things. And in that bar, we basically make cold brew teas and cold brew nitrogen coffee. And again, it's all local. Everything we do is local, and as many herbs we can find locally as well. If a client can't come out, we'll go out of our way to deliver it. And you're getting that personal touch when you come in. If you have an issue, we will listen and help you. We're very, very active in the community, so we would like the same thing back for the community to come to.
It's time to talk back
on the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
The timing of Bill C-10 couldn't be worse for ordinary Canadians, all wrapped up in fighting COVID-19. And the Trudeau government is trying to take control of the internet. And you know what? It's not even hyperbole, okay? The Heritage Minister, Mr. Gilles, he talks quite matter-of-factly about it. About blackouts and kill switches. Bill C-10, Bill C-10. Remember that, okay? It's Bill C-10, and it's not a good bill. It's a good bill to kill. Michael Geist might be the most knowledgeable person in the country. And, I mean, he can't ring the alarm bell louder. Professor at the University of Ottawa and expert in internet law, Canadian law, he calls the Trudeau government, because of what it's doing with Bill C-10, he calls the Trudeau government, quote, the most anti-internet government in Canadian history. I mean, do you want Mr. Trudeau to have the power to make websites go dark because there might be some content on that website that the Trudeau Liberals don't like, that the Trudeau Liberals have deemed to be harmful in not keeping in line with the vision that Mr. Trudeau has for the country. I'm not down with the government having that kind of authority. It wouldn't matter the political stripe of the government. Look, I'm all for web giants like Netflix, Facebook, Google, Amazon paying tax in this country. I'm all for that. They do business here. They have customers here. Of course they should pay tax here. This started out as a so-called Netflix tax, and now it's morphed into this monster that would hand massive new powers over to the CRTC and maybe even another unnamed government agency to regulate and control the internet, to make certain that the content on the internet is in line with the government's vision. Let's listen to Peter Menzies again, of former member of the CRTC, and what he told me this week on the Rob Snow Show.
It gives the government, through a government agency, the ability to tell people what they may and may not say. And basically, going forward, everybody who's speaking online, I mean, you'll be okay. You can probably still write a letter and stuff, but everybody who's speaking online would be doing so with permission of the state. And I don't think there's any justification for that.
Permission of the state. Blacklock's reporter, a small news team at Blacklock's Reporter, is once again, love you guys, just beating every other news outlet in the country over the head with this one. It reported yesterday, quote, Heritage Minister Stephen Gilles, in a draft order to federal regulators, says enforcement of a YouTube censorship bill must comply with the government's vision of internet content. The government's vision of internet content. Scofflaws are punishable by a $15 million fine. It goes on. Bill C-10, an act to amend the Broadcasting Act, would regulate YouTube to ensure users' uploaded content serves the needs and interest of all Canadians. Well, who decides that? Well, the government would. That it reflects their circumstances and aspirations. However, Minister Gilles' draft order states the government vision will determine enforcement. Government vision will determine enforcement. The policy direction will ensure that the new tools introduced by Bill C-10 are used in a way that is consistent with the government's vision, wrote Gilles. It represents the government's early and broad intentions. The government's vision for what the internet should be. Michael Geiss calls it the Great Canadian Internet Firewall. You see, China has an internet firewall. There's no free internet in China. You can't read about what China is doing to the Uyghurs in China on the internet. It's blocked. You can't be in China and say, free Tibet on the internet in China. No, it doesn't go. It's blocked. Okay? In the interest of social harmony. It's not in the government's vision for what the internet is supposed to be. Maybe we're headed down that road in this country with this bill. Bill C-10. Frank in Carleton Place. Good morning, Frank.
Yeah, good morning.
Hi.
First off, I want to say I'm only 24 years old. I'm probably a fair bit younger than most of your other callers.
Yeah.
This bill has me really scared.
Good.
Yeah. I don't know if you recall a while back, they tried introducing this bill, Bill C-21, and it would have banned airsoft guns, which are used for a sport that I play almost religiously, and are what allowed the airsoft community to work together and stand up for ourselves was communicating over the internet.
Okay.
And yeah, and they're saying that this is going to help them suppress posts and content that doesn't align with their goals.
Their vision.
So by that logic,
their vision
would have been sitting ducks, right?
Yeah. Well,
it's really alarming.
You walking around with an airsoft gun that looks like, I'm assuming this fell under some kind of gun control measure?
Yeah, it was
a ban on assault weapons and what have you, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think we've done a good job of standing up for ourselves. We're probably okay.
Right.
But
But if that weapon looks threatening, that's certainly not within the government's vision, I would suspect.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. And that's like 99%.
Maybe YouTube would have to take that down.
Yeah,
or YouTube would.
It was a lot of stuff on Facebook too that helped us coordinate. It was if C10 were already law, we would have been sitting ducks basically.
Okay. All right, Frank. Thank you.
Sorry.
Yep.
Yeah, there was one other thing I wanted to say if you have time.
Go ahead. Yep.
I have friends like my age who are first or second generation immigrants who moved from countries like in Eastern Europe that lived under authoritarian regimes, and they're wanting to move back now because of this stuff.
Wow.
Yeah, I have a friend from China who wants to get to Taiwan somehow. Like it's really concerning.
Well, that's interesting that you say that, Frank. Thank you for your call. This is what, again, this is our expert that we had on the program because he used to be with the CRTC and has a journalism background as well. Peter Menzies. You know, if you want an example of what C10 would do, look what happened in India. All kinds of outrage on social media in India because of the situation with COVID-19 in India. And the Indian government forced Twitter to remove a bunch of content.
And if you want an example of what could happen, look at what India did yesterday with Twitter. They took down, on the order of the Indian government, Twitter had to take down a number of posts, some of which were probably fake news, but a great many of which were also people just being critical of the government for its mishandling of the COVID situation and holding public, political rallies during it, and that sort of stuff. So, I mean, if that's what you want, back this bill.
Yeah. And you get the government you deserve. We've reached halftime. The Talkback Hour and the Friday Free-for-All, although one topic has dominated our Friday Free-for-All, and it's the great internet power grab. Bill C10. You can have your say. There are other topics out there. It's a free-for-all, so pick your own. If this is not of interest to you, it is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
Number one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Friday, April 30th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now with rain, it's 10 degrees in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, and here's what's making news this hour. Close to 4,000 new cases of COVID-19 in Ontario in the past 24 hours. The province reporting the cases come from just over 53,000 tests, the positivity rate at 7.4%. Now, 196 of these new cases are in Ottawa. There are 27 new cases in the Eastern Ontario Health Unit, 4 in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, 5 new cases today in Renfrew. The Prime Minister expected to address a couple of issues at his regular address on COVID this morning. Provinces have pushed for the quarantine for those people returning to Canada by land crossings if they've been out of the country for non-essential reasons. Also, vaccine supply from one company that comes from Europe at the moment may be switching to those manufactured in the United States. Good news on the economic front. StatsCan says the country is about 2% away from pre-pandemic levels. That could be cut in half once the final stats for March are in. StatsCan says the Canadian economy grew by 6.5% in the first quarter of this year. It's just waiting to finalize March numbers. They're expected to show it is just 1% behind the economy pre-pandemic. Sunday bike days are now weekend bike days at the NCC. COVID-19 has dragged on, and the NCC is opening up more space now for outdoor activities promoting physical and mental well-being. Every weekend from May to October, starting on Saturday, NCC parkways will be open for active use. So that includes things like cycling, running, and walking, both in the morning and the afternoon. City News Time, 10:32. I'm Andrew Boyle. For News Anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Talk back.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
This is a Friday free-for-all, but I'm encouraged to see a lot of interest in Bill C-10, an act to amend the Broadcasting Act, otherwise known as a massive grab at freedom of expression in Canada. I mean, first, the government wants to regulate YouTube content and services like YouTube, TikTok, Twitch, probably another one, right, I guess, all to be regulated by the CRTC, the same agency that, regulates the Supper Hour News, that regulates the Rob Snow Show. Government moving in to regulate YouTube as though it's a radio station or it's a TV station. And if that's the case, okay, there are standards. And YouTube in this country would never be the same. I assume it would have to abide by Canadian content laws, strict to the letter controls over copyrighted material. YouTube would have to make sure nothing ever goes out on its platform that is ever perceived to have crossed a line in terms of being controversial. And now controversial would be anything that's not in line with, quote unquote, the government's vision. The government's vision. It's an assault. It's suppression of speech, thought, and expression. It's like the Broadcast Standards Council on steroids. Massive power grab on freedom of expression. On the freest platform of them all, the internet. And again, I come back to the timing, happening at a time when most of the country isn't even paying attention. They're going to wake up one day and think, what? Because right now, everyone's too worried about the pandemic to do the heavy looking on and in-depth analysis of something like this. The reason that it was kind of thrust into the news this week, that it made the news at all, is because when this bill was introduced, platforms like YouTube were supposed to be exempt from regulation like this. And then it came to the committee, and the committee has now removed that exemption and has said YouTube, other platforms, we're saying YouTube because it's the most prominent, right? They're going to be regulated the same way the CBC is regulated. And YouTube will have to play by the same rules. Do not cross this line or you will have to answer to a government agency. What does that mean for someone in Canada who likes to put stuff up on YouTube? The government is saying, well, you're not really a broadcaster. You don't need to worry about this. YouTube is the broadcaster. It most certainly will. And it's going to be subject to all the heavy burdens of broadcasting regulation in this country. It's going to have to, quote unquote, tell Canadian stories, promote Canadian content. And I guess whatever you're posting on YouTube, if it falls short of these flaky goals, okay, YouTube will be in trouble and will have to answer to the regulator because it's under the threat of massive new fines, $15 million. Comply or we hit the kill switch. Bill C-10, you have to admire the moxie. I guess that the Liberals would even dare go there, but they're going there. Going where no government has gone before. Eric in Barrhaven, thank you for waiting. Good morning. You're on City News.
Hi, Rob.
Hi.
I'm going to go in a slightly different direction.
Okay.
And you sort of alluded to it a little bit earlier. I mean, right now, the Junior and his Liberals are in a whole whack of trouble, mostly over the handling of the pandemic response. It's been going on for 13, 14 months. Nothing but bad news for them. Well, I'm going to suggest that this is being put up as a distraction. I don't really think that anyone in their right mind, even in the Liberal Party, would follow through on this. I think they're using this as smoke and mirrors just to get people talking about anything but the pandemic response. Just a thought.
Oh, really? Okay.
Just a thought.
Okay. You're giving them a lot of credit.
Well, I'm trying not to give them too much credit, but there's no overflow of intelligence in that Liberal tent.
Okay.
But I think there's enough to say, listen, guys, we've got a big problem in terms of messaging over the last year with the pandemic.
So let's try this massive overreach, and then we'll pull it back, and we'll look like heroes for we'll look like a responsive government.
Let everyone put their hair on fire, and then hand them the extinguisher.
We heard Canadian. Not only do we have your back, but we listen to Canadians. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. You're being generous. I don't know. Maybe. Anything's possible. Ron in Barrhaven. Ron.
How are you?
I'm hanging in there, buddy. I'm hanging in there.
I figured you are.
Yeah.
I think Eric, I always respect usually what Eric says.
Yeah.
Usually, sorry. I don't think this is a ploy. Has everybody forgotten C-16? We already have compelled speech laws in this country. I can see them doing this, and nobody's saying a peep.
Okay.
I mean, there's a father in jail in B.C. because of C-16. This is insanity. And this is where we live, and nobody says anything. It's outrageous.
Okay.
What's wrong with these people?
What's wrong with these people? How long have we been asking that, Ron? Thank you. I mean, the government defends this draconian overreach by saying, well, it's really about our cultural industries and it's about protecting copyright material from ending up on platforms like YouTube. But the fact is, we have copyright law in Canada, okay? I can't legally upload the latest blockbuster, put it on YouTube. I can't put the latest episode of Schitt's Creek on YouTube. What's going to happen? The rights holder is going to complain and YouTube's going to flag it and take it down. Yet, despite this, the government wants to take this giant leap and basically give the broadcast regulator all sorts of authority to have this good long look at whatever's being posted on YouTube or a similar platform to make sure that it's all in keeping with the Trudeau Liberals' vision for Canada. What is being said? Is it promoting Canadian content? What about underserved communities? Okay. Is it telling a Canadian story? Is it offensive? Could someone be offended by that material? I mean, it's hard enough for a lot of people to speak their minds already without someone finding something to be offended about. Now, try to tiptoe through this minefield. Now, the government says, well, we're not coming after you, the YouTuber in Ottawa, doing videos about makeup or video games or home renovations or whatever. It's not about you, the individual content creator. We're just going after the platforms. Okay, then. So the government won't kill my freedom of expression. It's going to outsource that to YouTube. And YouTube will be this kind of middleman and do the government's dirty work. It's insanity. Matt in Canada. Good morning, Matt.
Good morning.
Morning.
Been listening
and I heard, I think his name was Frank in Carlton Place, how he linked C10, the internet censorship, with C21 with the airsoft/gun ban.
Okay.
That's worrying to me. Ever since that C21 bill came out, I've paid close attention to it. It's very convenient for the Trudeau Liberals under a pandemic. Every time things get bad or there's another issue they want to sweep under the rug, they bring up some.
So C21, just remind me, because all these bills have names and whatever. I hear Bill 21. I think about the Quebec bill. So what's C20?
Basically, they
is that the assault weapons ban, quote unquote?
They decided, about 2,000 variants and types.
Right.
All types of guns that are basically harmless hunting rifles, a lot of them.
Yeah, but some of them look menacing, right? So
exactly.
They're
menacing.
So let's say you're Matt, you put, say, instructional videos up on this at you're a legal gun owner going to a entirely legitimate gun range and making a video and it's put up on social media. Do you think that's in the Trudeau government's vision for Canada?
Exactly. They don't like how that looks.
Of course
that's
not.
The Canadian way. That doesn't fit our view.
Yeah.
That better be removed, or that's hateful and dangerous.
You're onto it, man. You've got it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. They have a real good idea for how to treat people like us.
Yeah. You've got it. You've got it, man. Thank you.
One other point there, quickly, Rob.
Yeah.
I follow Pierre Poilievre on YouTube quite a bit.
Yeah.
And on your show, he recently came out with a video. It was a gentleman, Matthew, I think his name was, worked for Leuna. He was concerned about the inflation with all of the money pumped into the economy.
Mm-hmm.
Very good presentation Pierre did. And,
well, there is no inflation. You just listen to the Bank of Canada. There's no inflation. There's no, the price of lumber hasn't been this high in 20 years, and the price of gas around the corner is $1.30. Exactly. So as long as you don't own a house and as long as you don't drive, don't worry about inflation, Matt.
As long as they say it's true, I guess.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Blacklock's reporter, again, reported on Bill C-10 this way this week. Quote, YouTube management, not individual users, will be liable for complying with the Broadcasting Act. The committee stripped a YouTube exemption from Bill C-10 that would regulate Netflix and other internet video services like TV stations. It includes a requirement they contribute significantly to the creation and presentation of Canadian programming. End quote. Contribute significantly to the creation and presentation of Canadian programming, the Canadian vision. I mean, we're talking about YouTube videos here. We're not talking about the national on CBC. Okay, it's madness. It's madness. Steve, Westboro. Good morning, Steve.
Good morning. How are you?
Sunshine and lollipop, Steve. How do you think I'm doing, buddy? I don't even know how much longer I'm going to be allowed to do this show. I don't know if I'm, in keeping with the government's vision for Canada, Steve.
I got a question for you.
Yeah. Well, make sure it's in keeping with the vision of the government of Canada, sir. And then
Okay.
Yeah.
On the internet, what about the white supremacist groups? Will they be able to get rid of?
We already have hate speech laws in Canada, sir.
Okay, so we have all that, right?
Yes. We have hate speech laws in Canada.
Well, that's really good to have because, you can go on the internet and look up the white supremacists, the KKK.
Yes, you can.
And all their realistic point of views, right?
Yes, you can. Conspiracy theories, anti-vaxxers.
I think they should wipe that right out. They shouldn't be allowed to be in Canada's internet as far as the white supremacist goes and the KKK.
We have hate speech. Okay, I got you, Steve. I got you, and I understand that's a prevalent opinion. But in a democracy where you value free speech, you have to defend the most vile things sometimes, because that's the only way we're all afforded protection. We have hate speech laws. We have human rights tribunals. We have libel laws. We have civil courts to sort out libel lawsuits. And we have copyright law. And in Canada, we have a Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which our friends in power seem to have forgotten about. We have freedom of thought, belief, opinion, expression, freedom of the press, media of communication. Everyone, Steve, everyone. You can think what you want to think, believe what you want to believe, express yourself however you want to express yourself. Freedom of the press, freedom of other media of communication like the internet. Freedom, Steve, is under threat. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
This hour of the...
Everyone's got their own little dreams. I want to write the next novel. I want to write a screenplay, which I still want to do. So owning my own business is something I've always in the back of your mind. Oh yeah, that'd be really cool to try and do. I end up lost my job that I had for 20 years. And I found myself with nothing. Trying to figure out what am I going to do now. I'm mid-40s and, you know, I got a lot of different experience, mainly in retail. So I figured, you know what, let's try to give this a go. I didn't really have any money. I started up with the little website. We went with that, and then it's kind of just grown from there. You know, I have such a passion for this, it's not even work for me. This is a hobby that I get to, you know, thankfully make a living off of. When you walk in, you're going to be overwhelmed, I think, with all the amount of licensed product that we have. I only sell licensed product. I don't sell anything no name or anything. Everything is 100% officially licensed, depending on the franchise. So I like to support a lot of different franchises, a lot of pop culture. So I do have a little bit of music, vinyl, Star Trek, Star Wars, Marvel, DC, Doctor Who, Game of Thrones, you know, you name it, there's probably something around. Or if I don't have it, you let me know and I'll do whatever I can to, you know, try and find it for you. I do some comic books. A lot of the interesting things that I do are items that you just don't find anywhere else. I probably have the best selection of pop culture cookbooks. So cookbooks from Walking Dead and Downton Abbey and Orange is the New Black, Hannibal, Marvel, Wonder Woman. I've got the best selection of Star Trek ships in the city. Well, actually, I've got the best selection in the country. I'm the only retailer in Canada that deals directly with the company Eagle Moths. I've got the best variety of Pop Funko figures within the city. I got the best prices, hands down. Even some of my action figures that I sell that are available at Walmart and Toys R Us, I'm cheaper than them, which is a lot of times you don't realize it. So even that small business can offer you a great value.
It's time to talk back
on the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
So just an update on the final hour of our program. Here's what we're going to do because we've had to make some adjustments. We had Premier Ford scheduled to do his news conference at 11, and then that was pushed back to, for some reason, to 11:30. And I was thinking to myself, well, that's not going to go because Trudeau is doing his thing at 11:30. So then, sure enough, David just got word the Ford news conference has been moved to noon. So we are going to do our Queen's Park Week in Review with our 3 MPPs at 11. Is that right now, David? Because we moved that to 11 to accommodate Doug Ford's news conference at 11:30. And then Doug Ford canceled the 11:30 and moved it to noon. And so we'll carry the Prime Minister's news conference starting at 11:30. All of this is subject to change sometime in the next 10 minutes.
We'll see what happens.
Right. But the reason Doug Ford's thing was canceled is because It was set up outside in the backyard of his mother's house in Etobicoke, what the media calls the Etobicoke compound. And apparently it's very windy, and they had a tent set up, windy, rainy, in Etobicoke. And the whole setup that they had blew over.
They're having trouble with the infrastructure out there.
Infrastructure deficit. Okay.
We'll have to get Caroline Mulrooney on the job there.
Okay. Bill in Toronto. Bill.
Hey, good morning.
Hey, Bill, how's the weather, Bill? Windy in Toronto, I hear.
It's not actually windy where I'm at.
Okay,
Maybe it's just Doug. Maybe it's Doug creating the wind out there.
Okay, all right. So, Bill C10, I imagine you're a big fan, Bill.
Well, actually, it doesn't surprise me in any way, shape, and form.
Okay.
Here's a man that took more than $500 million to buy off Canadian mainstream media.
Just the newspapers.
Mainstream media that I wouldn't give 2 seconds of my day to even consume.
All right.
And now what's he going to do? He's going to control the internet. This is, I can see the plan rolling out nicely for the guy.
Okay, thanks, Bill. Thanks, Bill. Good to hear from you. It's only the newspapers that got that money, okay? Just the newspaper. It was a newspaper bailout. There's a newspaper. Now, there's another piece of legislation in the works, and it's even darker. I mean, this is what the critics are calling the government's plan for the internet kill switch. There's something the Heritage Minister, again, Mr. Gilles, talks quite enthusiastically about the government having the internet kill switch, dealing with online material that the government considers harmful, which could mean a whole new regulator in Ottawa. The government will decide what online material is harmful, what will get the blessing of the government censors in the online world. People, if the Harper government had even considered doing anything that came close to this, there would be howls of outrage, screams of dictatorship from one end of the country to the other. We would have to dust off that. Remember that parliamentary page who held up the Stop Harper sign in the House of Commons? We'd have to get the helicopters back in the air, flying over center block with the long banners that read, Harper hates me, Harper hates me. I mean, the Trudeau guys are talking about internet blocking. Internet blocking. You have 24 hours to take this down forever, or we're going to fine you $15 million. This is the kind of stuff that they're talking about here. With Bill C10. Alex in Canada. Alex.
Hey, Rob.
Hi. Good morning, Alex.
Hi. Good morning, Rob. When governments take our freedom of expression away, they don't come out and say, we're going to take your freedom of expression. I'm an immigrant from Egypt, and I can wholeheartedly tell you, this is how authoritarian regimes start. It's always innocent, but it's frivolous, and it's wrong. And we're going to fight back. We're going to have to get smarter. I'm now, when something gets put down from YouTube, I go to Rumble so I can hear it. We should be the judges of what we should be hearing or not hearing. We have laws, like you said, against racism and this and that. They use that as an excuse to take our freedom of expression. And people have to be very, very careful. My country, I know it happened in my country. I don't want to see it happen here. And that's how it starts. And we should be under no illusion that our freedom of expression in Canada right now is under assault.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Alex.
Very, very
Yeah. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Alex. Darlene, Ottawa. You're on the air, Darlene.
Hi, Rob.
Hi, Darlene.
I agree with that last caller. He said it very well. You know, Bill C-10, it does take away our right to speak freely. And when you look at Trudeau, in my opinion, he's done nothing for Canadians except giving them a great big bag of debt. And, you know, you look at communism, which he's a great fan of, and China, and you take away the press, you make them dependent on the government, and you have a love of communism, whichever communist leader does. All those things to me scream Trudeau. And I just think what he's doing is so wrong.
Okay.
It would be another diversion but I don't trust him, and I don't trust him at all. And you know what? Maybe I'm getting paranoid, but when I saw that photo of Trudeau and Sophie getting their AstraZeneca,
right,
I thought, he's never done anything for us. That's probably water in there or another vaccine. I really thought that.
Oh, really? Okay.
No, I did.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I don't know why you would think that, Darlene, but we'll have to end it there because we're a little tight on time. I mean, Canadians should not have to tolerate an internet that really has to be made in the image of the government's vision. And yet, this is not some dystopian view of the future. This is what the Trudeau government is working on in the here and now. Maybe they'll have a brand new internet regulator. What will we call it? The Canadian Internet Content Commission. How does that sound? The CICC, Canadian Internet Content Commission. With a board of directors. Stuff with government loyalists. Issuing online content creators a notice of removal. You can imagine how this is not impossible to see this scenario unfolding. The material that you have posted has been deemed to be harmful for, well, pick your reason. Whatever reason the government considers to be harmful. It's not in the government's vision. You hurt my feelings. You said mean things about me on Twitter. You disagreed with the government policy. You hereby have 24 hours to remove it from the internet forever, or your website goes dark, or you'll be fined $15 million. That's called an internet kill switch. Michael Geist calls it the Great Canadian Firewall. And if it ever comes to pass, say goodbye to free expression on the internet. It would cease to exist in Canada. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
This is City News.
CIWW 1310 AM in Ottawa.
And CJET 1011 FM in Smiths Falls and the Valley. Number one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Friday, April 30th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls with some rain, it's 10 degrees. And here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Almost 4,000 new COVID-19 cases province-wide over the past day. The province reporting cases come from just over 53,000 tests that were done. The positivity rate has dropped a bit today, 7.4% now. 196 of the new cases are in Ottawa, 27 are in the Eastern Ontario Health Unit, 4 in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, 5 in Renfrew. The province also says it has recorded an additional 21 deaths. Now, the Prime Minister will be holding a media briefing very shortly after a change from our largest vaccine supplier and also a push from the provinces for tighter border controls. Here's our Parliament Hill reporter, Cormac McSweeney.
Pfizer has been the largest and most consistent supplier of COVID vaccines for Canada, with all of our doses being delivered from a production plant in Belgium, but that is about to change. CBC reports the company is going to start sourcing all of Canada's doses from plants in the United States beginning May 3rd. Until now, U.S. export controls have prevented us from getting our doses from U.S. plants, but as vaccination rates soar south of the border, Biden has been open to sharing more and recently started letting Mexico access Pfizer shots. It's not clear what this will mean for our delivery and shipment numbers at this time, but they will likely improve as a result. Meanwhile, the Ontario government has sent a letter to the Trudeau government demanding the feds impose mandatory 3-day hotel quarantines for all travelers entering at land crossings from the U.S. That rule is currently in place only for air travel. The province says there are reports of international travelers booking return flights to American airports and driving across the border to avoid hotel quarantines. Cormac McSweeney, Parliament Hill.
City News Time, 11:02. Now the forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Periods of light rain will switch over to snow tonight as the temperature drops. We've already reached our guaranteed high. It was 11 degrees early this morning. We'll drop to 3 this afternoon and then down to -2 tonight. For today, already reached our guaranteed high, 11.
And right now in Smiths Falls and in Ottawa, it's 10 degrees. COVID-19 vaccine rollout in the city continues to ramp up, with residents 55 and older now able to book their appointments as of today. That is the same age in the Eastern Ontario Health Unit. The man in charge of the City Vaccine Task Force is reflecting on the path to this point, including diverting of thousands of employees to help a number of areas like parking, IT, and security.
It didn't happen seamlessly, but it happened because of the team effort. And, we set up what we call our emergency operations center, our command center at the city, like we do whenever there's a disaster. So we really did this as if this was a disaster, and it is. It's one that's very different than, our major bus crashes that we've had, or tornadoes, or major floods.
As of right now, Anthony DeMonte telling City News, Ottawa is currently using 4 of its 7 mass vaccination sites, although plans are in place to quickly ramp up, use all 7, and move to 24/7 if needed. He says we've reached the pinnacle of the rollout. Mass vaccination is the best tool to recapture some sort of sense of normalcy. City News Time, 11:03. Emergency officials in Israel say dozens of people killed at a religious festival in a human stampede. Reporter James Longman says the stampede began when large numbers of people tried to exit the festival site through a narrow tunnel-like passage.
This is being called Israel's largest peacetime disaster. So far, we know at least 44 people have been killed and more than 150 injured in this massive stampede. It happened at a religious festival overnight. Now, because of COVID, authorities had asked only 10,000 people to turn up, but more than 100,000 worshippers attended this festival. The barriers that had been put up to separate them ended up fencing them in.
Now, Israel's government has declared Sunday a national day of mourning for the victims. I'm Andrew Boyle. For News Anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Strong voice.
Strong opinions.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Okay, let's launch right into it. And I want to thank our MPPs today for being flexible. We usually do this at 11:30 on a Friday. We have changed things around because, basically we were trying to accommodate the Premier Ford news conference, which had been scheduled for 11 o'clock and then was moved to 11:30, and now it's been moved to noon because it's very windy in Etobicoke, and they had a tent set up for the Premier to do his news conference, and it blew over, and they they have to get reset up again. Nevertheless, let's get into it. It's been a very busy week. David Piccini is going to join us shortly. He's the Progressive Conservative MPP, Northumberland-Peterborough South. We'll hear from him when he joins us. John Fraser's with me now, Liberal MPP, Ottawa South. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Rob.
And Gilles Bisson, NDP MPP for Timmins. Good morning, Gilles.
Good morning.
All right, let's start with you, Gilles. Your reaction to 3 paid sick days.
Well, it's a step in the right direction. You're not going to say, and we're not going to take the position that this will come to no good, but it's not what experts have been calling for. The experts have been pretty clear. If a person is in contact with somebody else who has COVID or themselves, they need to get isolated for at least 14 days. So the problem that you now have is that if somebody suspects that they're not feeling well, 3 days certainly is a step in the right direction. But it is not going to be the deterrent that we need in order to help employees stay at home, not be at work, in order to stop the community spread. Because what we do know is that the majority of the spread that we're seeing of COVID these days is by way of workplace and community. It's not just strictly the borders. So we need to have mechanisms by which you're going to make sure that people who are not feeling well are able to stay at home, isolate, in order to not continue the spread.
Step in the right direction. This is the Labour Minister, Monte McNaughton.
Ontario workers now have access to the most generous sick pay program coast to coast. Through this bill, we are the only province in Canada to introduce paid sick days specific to COVID-19. If passed, all workers will soon have access to 3 paid sick days. This is more than the 1 day available to workers in Prince Edward Island and the 2 days available to workers in Quebec. This is a game changer, and this will save lives.
Game changer that will save lives. Gilles Bisson says step in the right direction. What do you say, John Fraser?
Say that we did have 2 paid sick days here in Ontario in 2018 until Premier Ford took them over.
And now there's 3.
And now there's 3. But here's the thing. For 400 days, essential workers were making the decision between going to work sick or putting food on the table. So they were left unprotected. And now they have some measure of protection. And that's a good thing. Is it enough? Nope. It's not enough. Science table agrees. We asked that the science table take a look at the sick day policy. And so it is what it is. And you know, Gilles' right. Nobody stood in its way. We passed the bill with unanimous consent literally an hour and 15 minutes, an hour and a half after it was actually shown to us. So we need to do better than that. But people at least have some protection right now.
Okay. David Piccini, your thoughts, please, on the paid sick day program.
Yeah, thanks very much. Great to be with all of you. So the paid sick day program addresses the gaps that we've seen. We know that there's 2 big gaps. So when Premier Ford signed that agreement with all premiers across Canada that, addressed equity for all workers across this province, we knew there was the 2 gaps of speed of payment and the amount. And again, we're the first province in Canada to step up and address that. So addressing the speed of payment these 3 days gives employers and gives the workers, more importantly, that confidence to go and get a PCR test or stay at home if you're positive for COVID. Stay at home, not fear any loss, and then get on to that federal program, which we've also augmented, doubling the program to provide more support over a 20-day period. So, this is much needed. It's a far more generous program. In fact, the most generous in North America, and will help workers in Canada.
Okay, let me jump in. Yeah. The obvious question will be, David, what took you so long?
Well, I think that first and foremost, we've had this paid sick day program, and the best option is always to work collaboratively with all levels of government to address this. And as I said, we were the first province to implement job-protected leave. We were the first province to work with the federal government to highlight a number of the gaps. In January, Minister McNaughton said, can we speed up the payment? Credit to the feds. When we worked collaboratively, they did. But we know more needed to be done. So again, we're the first province to do this. And look, I understand that when you're the first, you're the first in a race. You get the win. You get the bulk of the criticism and the concern directed at you. But you pave the way for everyone else. And I suspect, John, we'll see a number of provinces follow our lead in the coming weeks and months ahead.
Okay. Who wanted in there? Gilles?
Well, I would only say, my honorable colleague says, we did all this stuff because we thought it was the right thing to do. They were talking against paid sick leave proposals on this very show. How many times did we talk about this over the winter, where the government took the position that, in fact, no, it was sufficient just to keep the federal programs, and the federal program was enough. We, the science table, and everybody else was saying no. It's not, because we see where the spread is. The spread is through the workplace and a community spread, because people cannot afford to do the waiting time to get their EI, their sick leave, and they're not able to afford the amount of money that that you get out of the sick plan. So 3 days is better than nothing. I'm not going to argue that's bad, but we had to drag the government kicking and screaming to get them to do 3 days, and for them to say it's the best in North America. Go look at New York State and a whole bunch of other places. They're far ahead of us when it comes to sick leave as far as how they compensate workers.
Yeah, you can just look. Yeah,
okay, John.
I agree, Gilles. We can look around places like the Yukon, New York State, stuff south of the border. Look, the gap was only acknowledged about 2 weeks ago, maybe 2.5 weeks ago. And it's a gap that the government helped to create when they took away 2 paid sick days. So, and the bottom line is this program, although it's going to protect some people right now, it didn't protect people for 400 days. It didn't protect family for 400 days. So it's too late for too many people. Too much damage has already been done. So I'm glad that it's there. But I don't think anybody should be patting themselves on the back for it. Sorry, it's just, that's the way I see it.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Can I jump in?
Sure, David, go ahead. Yep.
And this isn't a pat on the back exercise without question. I think we also need to draw a distinction. Comparing Ontario with Yukon is fine. If we look at the economic record under the Liberals, maybe that's the comparator they want to draw with comparing Ontario to Yukon. I prefer to compare Ontario with actual jurisdictions of our size, with international airports, economic engine, and sort of the net outcomes that we see in this province. Without question, more was needed. Ontario stepped up, addressed the gaps. It's a program now that provides supports for workers over a 23-day duration and gets support into them. I think there are other issues, John, that are important to addressing COVID in a holistic manner. We've got to address border issues. We've got to address vaccine issues, rapid testing. So, there's no one panacea. I take everybody's point that, yes, we always got to strive to address gaps and deficiencies. That's what the province of Ontario has done here. We're the first.
Yeah.
Again, I think it's worth noting we are the first in Canada to do that, and certainly more to do.
Okay. Let me ask you this, David, and then I'll let your colleagues respond here. Why does it expire on the 25th of September, these sick days? There are calls for it to be a permanent program.
Yeah, it's in coordination with the CRSB, and that's the federal program. So I think as we go forward, COVID's not a linear thing. So I think as we go forward, we can absolutely entertain discussions about how things look in a greater, longer duration of time. But I think, going forward right now, this is a program that works in conjunction with the federal program. It's augmented to improve the federal program and goes in alignment with that program to expire on September 25th, I believe, as you said, and will be reevaluated again, depending on the nature of COVID. And I think, again, if we want to have a separate conversation about paid sick leave, right, and what it looks like in a normal context of a non-pandemic year, and whether it's the employers who pay for it, whether it's the large employers versus small employers. John referenced New York. They distinguish between employers with 5 to 99 employees and others. I think blanket policies like the Liberals introduced, why we made the change, was it punished your 2 to 3 employee folks in downtown Port Hope with your Amazons. And so I think a more, thoughtful.
Or maybe is there maybe longer term, is there a broader role for WSIB to play? Is there some kind of a insurance scheme that could come up with? I don't know. I want to hear on the permanency of this. Gilles, go ahead.
Well, listen, it's interesting to see that Mr. Piccini is entertaining doing something more permanent. I wish they would have been there when Peggy Sattler's bill came to the House and actually proposed that. There was 2 parts to that bill. One was permanent sick leave, and another one was a pandemic sick leave. So that a similar type of arrangement is made where the employer pays the person directly, so there's no delay in your paycheck should you have to go off ill because you have symptoms or whatever it is, and then repaid by the essentially the general revenue fund. I think we're one of the few modern societies that, quite frankly, doesn't have good sick leave provisions within our structure, and I think it's something that we need to do. I was listening to an article, I think it was yesterday, on the radio where they were talking about one particular business, about 100 people that work there, and about how they themselves instituted sick leave, and they found that they saved money because people didn't come to work and infect other people that were in the workplace.
So the business didn't shut down and these kinds of things.
It's the thing to do, right?
Okay. Okay. John, let's hear from John. Go ahead, John. Okay.
To what
John?
Gilles was saying, it's smart business, especially in this situation where your operation could be shut down because someone comes to work sick.
Right. But if it's business as usual, John, right?
Sorry?
If it's business as usual.
Well, we know that paid sick days save lives. The reason that we put paid sick days in is to prevent people from going to work sick. Jill Promoli, who is an advocate for vaccination because her young son passed away, she's also, full disclosure, a candidate for us now. She worked very hard to bring paid sick days to Ontario. That's why we instituted those 2 days that would have been very helpful during the pandemic. I said, look, we have a common interest in making sure we keep each other healthy. And government has a role to play in that. Businesses have a role to play in that, just as David said. And we have a role to play in that too, as individuals, to make sure that we realize that that we have to try not to make other people sick when we're sick. And so, I think there's a very important discussion to have about permanency on this, and also our ability to adjust in public health crises like this, because hopefully something like this won't happen for a while, but we don't know.
When we come back, we'll move away from the sick day debate and into what happens next. The final report from the Long-Term Care Commission is going to be released today. I interviewed Bonnie Lysyk this week, Ontario's Auditor General, about her report into the decisions made about long-term care. I don't think any of them are really a surprise. The question is, what needs to be done now to make sure what happened doesn't happen again? That's what we'll talk about when we come back with our MPPs on Queen's Park Week in Review on The Rob Snow Show here on City News.
An old-fashioned traditional grocery store. You're going to find a butcher, okay? You want a steak cut a certain way, you're going to get it. There's flour piled in the warehouse. There's mixers on the floor. There's flour on the floor. The bakery's rented out to Frank Nicolo. It's him and his son come in at night. They mix the dough, they roll the dough, and they bake the dough. It's not the traditional frozen and thaw and put it in the bin, okay? It's made from scratch 7 days a week. It's probably the only bakery left in Ottawa that does that. Then customer service, we're big on that. The cashiers, the deli, you're not, if you ask for something, they're not going to point, it's an aisle number 7. They're going to bring you there, okay? If you have too much groceries out, we'll take it out to your car. You know what I mean? There's nothing we don't do for our customers. And we evolved around our customers. They would come in and say, can you try getting me this? Can you get me this? So that's how we built the lineup we have now, okay? So we have a lot of unique items that someone that came over to, live in Canada hasn't seen this particular product, but we sourced it and we have it for them that, like something they used to have as a kid. We have a lot of those unique items, a lot, from like all over the world. And we source it through, distributors in Montreal and Toronto that bring in the product in bulk, and we piggyback off of them. Probably the largest European deli in Ottawa. We sell lots because people buy lots. It's nothing really complicated about that. We turn over a lot of product. We package it properly. We buy, and we're always consistent. You're always going to buy, Cuddy turkey breast, Saint Daniel mortadella. You're always going to get the same brands. We don't flip back and forth to save 20 cents. It's always the same brands the last 29 years. Best sandwiches in town. It's simple. It starts off with fresh bread every day baked in the store. Anything that's left over goes to breadcrumbs. So you're getting a fresh bun every day that was baked probably 4 hours before you get here, okay? Not only baked, made, mix the flour, roll the dough, proof the bread, and bake the bread, okay? Then all the ingredients come right off the shelves. Your lettuce, your tomatoes, all your condiments, and they're cut up fresh in the deli. Not like the big, corporate restaurant chains that your lettuce comes in shredded in a bag, you open it up and you throw it in the bin. Takes, 2 or 3 days to get here from California. How long is it in the bag? The big difference is like making a sandwich at home and you don't have to do the work. It's really what the trick is, and using the freshest ingredients possible.
TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Queen's Park Weekend Review. A little earlier today. We're shuffling things around here to accommodate some live news events. So I want to get into long-term care with our MPPs, David Piccini, Gilles, Bisson, and John Fraser. None of this should really be a surprise. I interviewed the Auditor General, for example, this week, Bonnie Lysyk. Her office done 12 reports on long-term care. Okay, so none of this stuff about staff shortages, precarious work, older homes, ward rooms, inspection issues, infection control issues, long-term care that is disconnected from the rest of the healthcare system. Really, none of this is going to be a surprise, and I don't think much of what the Long-Term Care Commission releases in its final report will be a surprise. It's very much looking in the rearview mirror now. Okay? What is the government doing about long-term care? To fix long-term care, to modernize long-term care, so that if we're ever in this circumstance again, David Piccini, we don't have the same kind of outcome. David.
Yes. Can you hear me?
I hear you just fine, David. Go ahead, sir.
So two big things, structural and staffing. So 30,000 new long-term care spaces. We've seen 80 projects recently announced, just to augment already the many that were. So right now in Ontario, 20,000 new and 15,000 upgraded spaces, either near completion, completed, or somewhere in that development pipeline. I think to my own community, we've accelerated a number of builds, new modern spaces. We know that the spread of COVID, when you have a ward room, 4 to a room, all of these new spaces remove that 4 to a room and put you either in a private room with your own bathroom or a shared bathroom for accommodation. So that helps reduce that spread. And in addition, the 4 hours of direct care, that we will be a leader in Canada. We've committed over $4 billion to that. That's 27,000 healthcare professionals. We've seen free PSW training, standalone nursing, micro-credential strategy. I mean, Rob, you and I would need hours to talk about all the things that are being done. I think inspections, it's not just about getting new staff. I think for those PSWs, through laddering, career laddering, you saw we've also, at their request, PSWs introduced legislation to have their own regulating body, which is going to be key, their own sort of college, if you will. And in addition, the inspections. When we inherited a much long neglected system, the previous government wasn't making investments in new spaces. They weren't making investments to meet the staffing requirements. And we know that there were 8,000 open files that talked about neglect, sexual assault, and physical abuse. One of the recommendations Bonnie Lysyk, our Auditor General, made was, instead of just doing inspections, and looking at 5 cases, you need to prioritize those cases, target your inspections on offenders and those, have a risk profile, to address them, which is what we've done. We've hired more than 30 new inspectors.
We've
increased the envelope of funding for inspectors. But I would say, Rob, contrition here. Yes, more needs to be done. This is our responsibility to fix. I just wish we would hear from John, who actually.
Well, we're going to hear from John. Go ahead, 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 John.
Over the systemic neglect of his government.
David?
Go ahead, John. Go ahead, John. Our time is tight. Go ahead.
Yeah, look, we accept the findings of the Auditor General.
You accept your role.
Okay, one at a time, please.
Neglect.
One at a time. One at a time.
David, I didn't interrupt.
Let's go ahead. Come on, John.
Okay, and so, look, we did build or rebuild 30,000 beds. We did raise the wages of PSWs $4 an hour. We did actually institute RQI inspections. But it's about where we need to go. And the thing that's very clear is there's been a real challenge in this pandemic around ownership. And there's really we're not looking at that right now. We've got to fix staffing. But importantly, how are we connecting our elderly's communities to our community? And it's very clear from this pandemic that the for-profit model is not working well. So I think we have to be serious in looking at that and looking at how we actually, we would not have this model for childcare, for hospitals, right, for schools. So why is it any different when we're aging? And I think that's a really central question. There's a lot of work to do, but if we don't answer that question, we're going to end up in the same spot again and again and again.
Okay, Gilles, I think you're going to get the last word on this. We only have 90 seconds. Go ahead, Gilles.
Well, listen, I think, there's enough blame to go around when it comes to previous governments, Liberals and Conservatives, that did make the investments and the changes that are needed. We have an aging population. The baby boomers are starting to come into the system, are already in the system. And we've always known that this day was going to come where our system was going to get stretched beyond capacity. So there has to be changes, and we have put in place through Andrew Horvath and your Democrats a plan that does a number of things. One is you need to invest in home care. You got to make sure that people can stay at home as long as they can. Number two, if you're building new homes, you don't have to build big mega facilities. There's a lot of models in Europe and other places where you have smaller homes that are 6 to 10 people that are more like a residence than an institution. And make sure that you build them in the way that helps you stop the spread of various type of infections. And you've got to move to a public system. That's really the big one. You've got to make sure that at the end of the day, as John just said, and then, they didn't do it when they were in government, but it's something we're committed to, is that you wouldn't build a school in the private system today. You wouldn't build a hospital in a private system today. Yep. Why are we building long-term care facilities in a private system? And over a period of 8 to 10 years, we would move to transition it to a public system, whatever's private now.
All right. Okay. Look, I appreciate your flexibility this week. All three of you for being available half an hour early. I greatly appreciate it so we could talk about these important issues. Thanks again.
Thank you, Rob.
Yep. Liberal MPP John Fraser, New Democrat Gilles Bisson, and Progressive Conservative David Piccini. That's Queen's Park Week in Review. We're going to come back. We're going to have an expert on Bill C-10 coming up right after the 11:30 news. And Mr. Trudeau's news conference scheduled to begin any moment now as well. We'll have some of that for you. Doug Ford's news conference had been scheduled at 11. It's been moved to noon now. This is City News.
news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Good morning. It's Friday, April 30th. I'm Victoria Williston. Right now in Ottawa, we have some light rain, 10 degrees. Smiths Falls, 11 degrees. Here's what's making news right now. Ottawa residents 55 and older able to book appointments as of today for their COVID-19 shot. Anthony DeMonte tells City News that Ottawa currently using 4 of its 7 mass vaccination sites, although plans now in place to quickly ramp up if you use all 7 and move to 24 hours a day, 7 days a week if needed. Starting as early as next week, Education Minister Stephen Lecce says all education workers across the province will be able to book their appointment for the vaccine. The Ontario government anticipates that everyone could be getting their shot by the end of May. And the province has sent a letter to the federal government requesting quarantine measures currently in place for air travelers be extended to those crossing by land. In the letter to federal officials, Deputy Premier Christine Elliott says that they want to see that implemented at high traffic land crossings, including Niagara, Windsor, Sarnia, and Brockville. I'm Victoria Williston for News Anytime. You can follow us online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Firm.
Fair.
Fun.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
OpenMedia.org says Bill C-10 must be rejected by the Parliament to defend freedom of expression in Canada. Matthew Hatfield is campaign director for OpenMedia.org and joins me this morning on City News. Good morning.
Hi, Rob. Thanks for having me.
What is wrong with Bill C-10?
So it's a good question. Originally, Bill C-10 was supposed to be an act to reform our Broadcasting Act and give the CRTC power to regulate online streaming platforms and charge them for producing official Canadian content. We've been speaking out against Bill C-10 from the start. We think, of course, supporting Canadian content is a really good goal. But we think the particular way the government has designed C-10 really undermines that objective, damages the internet, and is really more about finding money for legacy media companies from the internet than it is about supporting Canadian stories. But the current problem with C-10 is much bigger than that. So last week at the Heritage Parliamentary Committee, the federal government removed an exception that was previously in the bill. And the exception used to exclude user audiovisual content, things like videos and memes and podcasts that you and I might put up from the bill's provisions, which means effectively that under the new form of the bill, all of the content of that type that we put up would be subject to CRTC broadcast regulation, which we don't know exactly how the CRTC would end up using those powers, but it could be enormously impactful. It could be things like if you posted political videos requiring, as a political fairness doctrine, having a corrective video expressing a different perspective alongside. It could be things like charging people who make money off their personal video content to produce CanCon. It could be things like changing our feeds of video and audio online to meet CanCon minimum content requirements.
Right. So
if you need to have 30% CanCon in your Instagram, for example, it's a lot of wild stuff.
30%. Okay. All right. So if I'm a foodie and I'm taking pictures, 30% of it has to be of Timbits then, I guess. So, okay.
That's right. You better have some maple syrup in there.
Okay. No, but in all seriousness, and there was a great concern expressed by many of my listeners during my call-in hour this morning. And one of the examples was a young man called in who does airsoft rifling. And some of these airsoft rifles have come under other pieces of legislation under the assault weapons ban, for example. And those people have been organizing, and they've been leveraging social media and putting up videos on social media explaining why they disagree with this government legislation, for example. And they were wondering if that is the sort of material that might possibly be captured by a bill like C-10. What do you think about that?
It's a fair question. I mean, I think the way C-10's designed right now, it would capture everything to some degree. And the question is, what would the CRTC do about it?
Right.
And, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. You could go ahead, Matt. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, and the reason we're concerned about it is we don't know how the CRTC would end up regulating it, and the government's in damage control mode right now, and they're trying to manage the public outcry that's come out around this. But they have said that they would issue guidance to the CRTC saying this is how we want you to use these powers, and you wouldn't go after this kind of stuff. But ultimately that would be cabinet discretion giving that kind of guidance. So we don't think it's reasonable for us to rely on cabinet choosing not to use excessive speech powers. We think that it's really important that the law be very, very clear and tight about what kind of power the government has over online speech. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I don't know very much about the example that you're giving of the airsoft rifles, but it does strike me as the kind of sort of borderline content that a government in the future could choose to come after that kind of speech.
Right. And that's an important factor to keep in mind. Now it's the Trudeau government. Someday it might be a conservative government that's empowered. Do you want a conservative government to have this kind of authority over a free and open internet? And usually, Canada gets pretty good scores internationally when it comes to having a free internet, an internet that's not censored, that's not subject to internet blocking, for example. One of the experts that we had on the program, a former CRTC commissioner on our program this week, said, look at what happened in India this week, where Twitter was ordered by the Indian government to take down critical tweets of the government's handling of COVID-19. That's the slippery slope, Matt, that people are afraid of, right? That's what we should be afraid of, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really good example where it has been a slippery slope, and legislation may have seemed reasonable when it was originally written there, but the government is using it in a way that's clearly more about protecting the government from criticism than actually defending public welfare at this point.
Okay. So your campaign director, OpenMedia.org, what's your campaign?
Well, our campaign in this case is we're calling on MPs to vote against V10. I think some of our frustration is that they've made such an enormous change to the bill at a very late stage. It had already gone through its first and second reading, and a lot of the media had their take. We still have other organizations coming out and defending V10 inaccurately because they don't realize the change that's been made. At this point, we think it's just too far gone. We're calling for it to be voted down, and we think the government needs to go back and restart the process of developing a bill around defending CanCon online. And they really need to get the public consultation from experts and from the general public that they kind of tried to skip over this time, and develop a much more stable, reasonable bill that we can all get behind.
What do you think about some of the government's lines of defense here, that it's about promoting, for example, cultural industries, that it's about protecting copyrighted material from appearing on some of these platforms, people making playlists and posting things on platforms, protecting copyrighted material and the creators of that copyrighted material, artists and the like, and as well to cut down on bots and the influence that bots can have in things like misinformation, disinformation campaigns. Matt, what do you think of those?
Yeah, well, I think the government has created a lot of confusion in the way that they've talked about this in other bills. Stephen Gilles has been speaking about internet regulation in Canada for 6 months or so now, if not more. And in many cases, he will be speaking about one bill and start referring to potential impacts of other bills. So things like bots, I don't believe would be addressed by this. And if that's something that they're planning to do, they should really make that clear, because I don't think that's an appropriate part of the CRTC's mandate necessarily.
Okay.
In terms of the cultural industry defense and the need to deal with
copyrighted material and these
copyrighted culture, yeah. I mean, I think there's a core of a purpose there, and that was the original version of the bill that we were previously debating. I think another version of what the government has been telling us is that this is really about supporting the telling of Canadian stories. And I mean, that is a goal that I think we would really get behind. Like, we do think telling Canadian stories in the 21st century is important. And the reason we're so frustrated with even the original version of this bill is that it seemed to be much, much more about copyright and finding money for legacy industries than it was about telling Canadian stories. And we judge that from the fact that things like revising CanCon definitions, which haven't been updated since the 1980s and are way out of date for the kind of identities we see in modern Canada, that was all delegated to a very distant CRTC process. Who knows when that would have happened? Not part of the bill. And things like producing content for modern internet platforms, things like Instagram and TikTok and all these social media sources that like young people actually like, where you can reach them to share Canadian culture. Yeah. That just isn't a focus of the bill at all. That's not what the government's concerned about. So it's frustrating from a telling Canadian stories perspective.
Thank you, Matt Hatfield, for your time this morning. Great to hear from you, sir.
You're very welcome.
Campaign director with OpenMedia.org. This is City News.
Hiring can be challenging.
It started out with a small outdoor booth in what was called Artist Alley, which is actually the area just outside our store on William Street, where for a couple of years we sold our jewelry directly on the street. And then we slowly evolved to having an indoor location in this building, 55 Borrowed Market Square. We then moved to another location in Place de Ville, and then moved back down here on Dalhousie Street at Irrigere in the 90s, and then back into this building again in 2000 as a collection. I do a collection of jewelry called Cirque that's mainly beaded work with a combination of semi-precious and vintage beads. And then she does a hat collection called Fanfreluche that's all cut and sewn hats in a variety of fabrics and for all of the seasons of the year. We've curated and sourced the artisans that we represent in a lot of different ways over the years since it's been, since 1985. Some people come to us since we're known, and other artisans that we represent might recommend that they come and see us. Some people we find at craft shows, or we see their work, somebody wears it in, and we go and track it down and bring it. And then some people, interestingly, are with us in one medium, and then sometimes they evolve to another. They're all Canadian and mainly local. With the roughly 50 people that we have, I'd say more than half of those are Ottawa-Gatineau, and then the rest are from other cities in Canada, Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver, etc. If you can afford it, go to a small business and spend some money. It's lovely when you come in and, give me a pep talk and tell me how much you love this place and you've been coming here for years. But if you can afford it, please spend some money too, because all the pep talks in the world are not going to pay my rent, which is still full rent even when we're closed. Then secondly, if you can't afford to spend money, follow the businesses that you want to support on social media. Go to their Instagram, go to their Facebook, follow their Twitter, and then retweet, share their Facebook page, like and comment. Because if you can't afford to, as many of us can't right now, to do extra expenditures, doing all of those little things like that will raise the visibility of those small businesses, and hopefully for them result in some online or curbside or other business for them.
He's a pillar of community opinion.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
The Prime Minister's news conference underway. This is Justin Trudeau.
The opportunity to congratulate Premier Silver of Yukon on his re-election. I look forward to continuing to work with him on everything from the fight against climate change and creating affordable childcare to our commitment on building a stronger relationship with Indigenous peoples. In fact, I'll be calling Sandy later today so we can discuss these priorities further. As I told everyone around the table last night, it's vital that we keep working together. We're following the situation with this third wave closely, especially in places that are hardest hit. Yesterday, Alberta reported their highest single-day total since the beginning of the pandemic. Premier Kenney announced new restrictions to slow the spread of the virus, and our government is ready to work with the province to provide support. For Ontario, Medical teams from the Canadian Armed Forces began arriving in Toronto on Tuesday night, including critical care nurses who will work in the ICUs. This first deployment of 55 members of the forces will be providing assistance to Sunnybrook Hospital and its mobile units. On Tuesday as well, a healthcare team from Newfoundland and Labrador arrived in Ontario. They're helping at Toronto General Hospital. Like I said before, we are actively working with the Government of Ontario to determine how else we can support them. For Nova Scotia, where cases are also high, we've deployed 60 Canadian Armed Forces members to testing centres to help stop the spread of the virus. And for New Brunswick, we've approved the province's request for assistance for long-term care homes. The Red Cross will assist in up to 3 facilities until the end of June. Nunavut has also requested additional support to deal with their current outbreaks. We're moving quickly to keep people safe by sending more PPE and health equipment and by providing support for households in isolation who need food or mental health services. We're also engaging with other provinces that are hit hard by this third wave to see how we can help. We're ready to send any resources needed to protect you and your family. And of course, we're continuing to deliver PPE, rapid tests, and vaccines. So far, we've distributed more than 15 million doses of vaccines right across the country. Wednesday, almost 1 million doses arrived in Canada, including our first shipment of the single-dose Janssen vaccine. Starting next week, we will be receiving 2 million doses a week just from Pfizer alone. This will mark another major ramp-up. We will continue to work with provinces and territories to get these doses to Canadians as quickly as possible. Il y a de plus en plus de gens vaccinés. Dans plusieurs provinces, la vaccination sera ouverte à la population générale très bientôt. C'est une nouvelle encourageante. Au cours de la dernière année, on a souvent répété que chaque effort compte. Chaque effort aide à protéger nos travailleurs de la santé, nos familles, nos voisins et tous les Canadiens. En portant un masque, en gardant nos distances, en restant à la maison, on aide à sauver des vies. Et c'est vrai aussi de se faire vacciner. Chaque dose de vaccin compte. Aussitôt que c'est votre tour, je vous encourage à prendre un rendez-vous pour recevoir votre vaccin. C'est important pour se protéger soi-même et pour protéger les autres. Et c'est seulement en se faisant vacciner qu'on va pouvoir passer à travers cette pandémie et revenir un peu à la vie qu'on avait avant. Au début de cette crise, on a promis aux familles, aux travailleurs et aux petites entreprises que notre gouvernement va être là pour eux. On met tout en place pour que notre relance économique soit la plus robuste et rapide possible. Just a few minutes ago, Finance Minister Freeland introduced the Budget Implementation Act in the House of Commons. This is the next step forward on the plan we laid out in last week's budget, a plan to get through the pandemic, create jobs, and make sure our economy comes roaring back. This bill includes extensions of support programs that have been a lifeline for millions of Canadians, from the wage subsidy and the rent subsidy to the Canada Recovery Benefit and the Recovery Caregiving Benefit. We're facing a very serious third wave. So we need to make sure we can deliver support to the workers and businesses who rely on these programs. Of course, that's not all this plan lays out. With this legislation, we're also setting the foundation for strong economic growth, with funding for early learning and childcare, support for students, a $15 federal minimum wage, and much more. I'll let the Finance Minister go into more detail in a moment, but here's the bottom line. These measures will help you get through what is hopefully the last stretch of this pandemic. This is about how we set ourselves up for a stronger, faster recovery that includes everyone. So all parties need to work together to get this support through the House of Commons to Canadians as soon as possible. En terminant, Tel qu'annoncé ce matin, je tiens à souligner qu'Isabelle Hudon, actuellement ambassadrice du Canada en France, a accepté de devenir la prochaine PDG de la Banque des entrepreneurs du Canada, soit la BDC. Sa feuille de route dans le milieu des affaires, autant au Canada qu'à l'international, fait d'elle la personne idéale pour ce rôle. Elle sera la première femme à la tête de la BDC et pourra poursuivre leur travail essentiel pour la relance économique afin d'aider la croissance de nos PME. Dans son rôle actuel, l'ambassadrice Hudon a su mener de nombreuses initiatives de diplomatie économique et, entre 2017 et 2020, les échanges commerciaux entre le Canada et la France ont connu une hausse de 30%. Our fight against COVID is not over yet, but there's reason to hope. With more people getting their shot and more vaccines on the way, we will get through this. And as we do, we're going to keep working together to rebuild a safer, healthier Canada and a stronger, more resilient economy that leaves no one behind. Before I pass it over to Deputy Prime Minister Freeland, I want to extend my deepest condolences to the families, friends, and victims of the tragedy at Mount Meron. Canada stands with the people of Israel and the Jewish community. Merci. Christian.
OK. Merci, Monsieur le Premier ministre. Aujourd'hui, j'aimerais répéter certains des principaux piliers du budget de 2021 et certains aspects où le projet de loi C30 permettra d'aider concrètement les gens dans ce qui est en cours pour beaucoup trop de Canadiens, une période d'inquiétude et d'épreuve. Parce qu'il ne faut pas se tromper. Même avec nos efforts soutenus, même avec le progrès de la vaccination, la COVID est encore là. Et la troisième vague est encore là. Par conséquent, la nécessité d'adopter ces mesures législatives est urgente. When fully enacted, this budget will create, in total, nearly 500,000 new training and work opportunities for Canadians. We're making a historic commitment to early learning and childcare. $30 billion over 5 years, reaching $9.2 billion every year in permanent investments. Within 5 years, families everywhere across Canada should have access to high-quality childcare for an average of $10 a day. Et je veux encore une fois remercier le Québec pour son leadership et surtout les féministes du Québec pour son leadership en ce qui concerne un système de garderie. This budget invests $5.7 billion over 5 years in Canada's young people, doubling the Canada Student Grant for 2 additional years, and extending the waiver of interest payments on federal student loans through March of 2023. More than 350,000 low-income student borrowers will have access to more generous repayment assistance. Nous proposons d'élargir l'allocation canadienne pour les travailleurs et investir 8,9 milliards de dollars sur 6 ans en soutien supplémentaire aux travailleurs à faible revenu. Cela offrira un complément salarial à environ 1 million de Canadiens supplémentaires et sortira près de 100 000 personnes de la pauvreté. De plus, le budget instaurera un salaire horaire minimal fédéral de $15. To help small businesses recover and grow, this budget contains a new Canada Recovery Hiring Program that will run from June to November and provide up to $595 million to make it easier for businesses to bring back laid-off workers or to hire new ones. We will also invest up to $4 billion to help up to 160,000 small and medium-sized businesses buy and adopt the new technologies they need to grow and become more productive and more competitive. And will encourage businesses to invest in themselves by allowing for immediate expensing of up to $1.5 million of eligible investments by Canadian-controlled private corporations in each of the next 3 years. These larger deductions will support about 325,000 businesses in making critical investments. Enfin, nous accordons un soutien ciblé aux industries qui ont été le plus durement touchées, soit les secteurs de l'hôtellerie, du tourisme, de la culture et de l'aérospatiale. Nous allons relancer le secteur du tourisme avec un investissement d'$1 milliard. Ceci est en plus de $2 milliards que nous accordons au secteur aérospatial. Tout simplement, notre priorité est de faire en sorte que les Canadiens puissent retourner au travail. This budget is about growth and about jobs. It's about people. It's about making concrete, targeted investments to heal the wounds of COVID and to put Canada on a long-term track towards higher growth, towards greater prosperity, and towards a clean, green future. The Budget Implementation Act, tabled today, is the first major step in delivering on this plan. As the Prime Minister said, it also includes extensions and expansions of critical COVID-19 support programs for businesses and for people, including the wage subsidy, the rent subsidy, and recovery benefits. These supports are vital, as I have heard in roundtables across the country this week. And these supports will continue to be vital until the virus is beaten. The legislation also takes significant steps to drive future growth, investing in our social infrastructure and our physical infrastructure, in our human capital and in our physical capital. When enacted, this budget will make...
Unfortunately, we have no time to get to the reporters' questions for the Prime Minister or the Finance Minister. Chrystia Freeland. We are right out of time, and that is it for the Rob Snow Show for this week. Mark Sutcliffe and the Power Lunch coming up after the noon news. We're back on Monday right after the 9 o'clock news on City News.
The Rob Snow Show.
Weekdays at 9 on Rogers TV and City News.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.